Hello, you lovely people. This is editor Chris here. So, a little bit of a heads up about this episode. It was recorded over a period of about 2 months. There was a few sessions that Becca and I did together, and we were determined to get this episode done together. Now, it was done before and after Becca was pregnant with our child and then gave birth to our child. And in fact, the last hour and a half, maybe, is recorded while we've got the baby next to us, sleeping and what have you. So, I'll be very upfront. If there are any mistakes, any audio issues, anything like that, that is on me. Hopefully you can find enjoyment in the content, but this episode has been a bigger undertaking technically and subject-wise than any I've done before. So, I just ask you to bear with me. If you want to feed anything back from a technical perspective, please do come and find me on Discord or find me on Instagram. I'm very much open to your comments. So, thank you and on with the show. Okay, great. Hello, no time like the present. Now, welcome back to another history. Nope. Fuck that one up straight away. Two things I messed up because I was going to say, welcome back to another Drunk History of Middle-earth episode. I'm Chris.
And I'm Rebecca.
And today we're going to talk about the history of Arnor. Now, this is going to be a big, long episode. I don't know how long it's going to be. We're putting this into chunks, like as in you're going to listen to it as one episode, but it's going to be done over multiple days, over multiple recording sessions. This is just the first one because I thought it was easier to just start things going. The other thing I was going to say was I've made a promise to myself to try not to swear as much on podcasts.
How come?
I just feel like it detracts from my message sometimes. However, I said fuck within the first 5 seconds of the recording, so
I'm going to try and concentrate on not breathing too heavily, because after sitting next to a pregnant person recently and I could hear them breathing, I'm now really conscious that I'm having a laboured breath. So wish me luck. I've already equipped myself with my Gaviscon.
You have been drinking that. Like, you drank some yesterday. You took it like a... So, we're both in our 30s, right? And, oh, by the way, so Spotify now, when you upload it, it does the chapters for you. So, I have no qualms about, like, dilly-dallying at the beginning, because I know you can just skip straight into the episodes. It's absolutely amazing. But yesterday, you took a shot of Gaviscon, like you would a shot of tequila in a nightclub 10 years ago. Then you kissed me like you also would have done after taking a shot in a nightclub 10 years ago. And you tasted very chalky.
I mean, it's just essential at this point.
Yes,
pregnancy, so...
Yeah, and one of the conversations we've had recently was, I'm out of Gaviscon, I've had to go to the Rennies, which is just... Pregnancy is crazy. So what's been going on with you? What have you been up to since our Tom Bombadil episode?
Just expanding, really. My mind getting close to the end of
pregnancy, not of a life.
Close to the end of my pregnancy, as well as reading Lord of the Rings. So
yes, you are near the end of Lord of the Rings. I think you might be able to get it before the baby comes.
Yeah, that's the plan, and I think that's why the baby's grown so much. It's just full of knowledge.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like, seeing you just kind of doing it is like, oh my God, I didn't think she was ever going to do it. You did say you're not going to read the appendices, which I've pushed back on a bit because I think you should. However, I don't think you should let it detract. Like, once you finish the main story, that is your achievement done. You've read Lord of the Rings. It took me years and years and years before I even touched the appendices. But I still think you should because there's so much in there.
Okay.
Like, even the tale of Aragorn in Arwen, for example, is a story in the appendices. So that might be one to, like something to really read. But yeah, good on you. Yeah, for any Jujutsu Kaisen fans, the unborn baby's doing a domain expansion on her body. It's pushing things outwards. It's going crazy. Very active baby, very big baby, I think, this one. They say 50th percentile, but I don't know how they can tell that.
I don't think it's an accurate measurement. Anyway, we have a scan soon, so we'll see. And
Do we? Oh, Tuesday?
yeah, so we've got a scan in 2 days, and we'll just see how it's going. Very excited for
Hell
it to
yeah.
come. And yeah, I've been enjoying reading Lord of the Rings.
And we stayed in a castle for a week. Well, I was there for a week. You were there for a few days. That was cool. This really, really old castle in a place called Stanhope in County Durham. Beautiful place. Like a proper castle-y castle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We had a hot tub, which was lovely. Our daughter loved that. And then my D&D group came and stayed with us, which once you went home, it was really nice. So
Nerds.
we spent a few days just nerding out. I got into Magic the Gathering.
That's what we need to do tomorrow. Pick up the map. That's what you said we were doing.
Friday it's up.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, I got into Magic the Gathering over the course of that. That's like being introduced to hard drugs for the first time. That was transformative, which is crazy. And what else have we been up to? There's Tolkien Tag coming up. I'm flying solo for this one, unfortunately. Becca's going to be far too pregnant. But given the size of this baby, I'm worried the baby's going to come before like their due date, because they're due at the end of June. But I'll be in Germany the last week of May. Sorry, going to see our friend in Hamburg first, and then we're going to go down to Tolkien Tag, and then the day I come back, I start a new job. It's all going on, isn't it? It's all going on. What about you? You got anything else going on you want to talk about?
Nah, I'm very boring.
Well, we've got Warwick Castle we're going to go to as well. We're going to go and stay there.
Hopefully get there.
So,
but yeah, apart from that, I'm very, very boring. I'm just wanting to be very, like, I want to hibernate.
You've gone very hibernation.
I don't even want to talk to people very much anymore, so...
Can't think of a way to segue this, but I've got another podcast I do with two stand-up comedians who I met doing stand-up comedy in the northeast of England called Think Tankards. Now, every week we cover a different topic, but we've got a couple of episodes that I've got a good crossover with Tolkien that I think you might enjoy. The first is, look out for it soon, is the Chillingham Castle episode. One of the most haunted castles in England, apparently. We went and visited there. That was a video episode that we're doing. And another episode is the history of role-playing games, starting from the 12th all the way through to Dungeons and Dragons and the other tabletop role-playing games as we know them today. So give that a shout. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, everywhere that this podcast is, basically. So yeah, give us a follow on there and give us a shout.
Obviously, it's not as good as this one because I am not on it.
People feel about Ian the way that people feel about you, where they kind of idolize anybody that's not me on the podcast. Basically, they're like, "Oh, they're amazing." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Maybe because you're a gobshite.
But it's also the gobshite who does all the research. You know, whatever.
Anyway, let's start.
Yes, today we are going to cover the history of Arnor. Now, what is Arnor, you may ask? It is, if you see on our map there, you can see Arnor is on the map.
Yeah, I'm
Gemma
cheating.
did. It goes between the Misty Mountains in the west, in the east, and the Blue Mountains, or the Ered Luin, in the west. Now, before we get too far into it, I'm going to ask Becca a very, very difficult conversation that happens in marriage sometimes. What do you want from the Chinese? Because I'm also ordering our tea as we do this.
Oh, but I'm going to sound really basic.
That's why I've waited till we're recording before I ask.
Just chow mein with curry.
Chow mein with curry. No, you've said it now. Well, let me order mine first, and then you can have yours. But yeah, tell me what you know about that area of the world where Arnor is, between the Misty Mountains and the Blue Mountains.
I don't know a lot. I can see because I can't really see, but I can see the Shire, which means that is there an area above the Shire that elves are in?
To the west, kind of, yeah. That's where the elves traditionally lived. Some elves. So that when the ones who stayed in Middle-earth after Beleriand sank, they went there as well.
So also this'll mean that Tom Bombadil is below the Shire.
He is just east of it, yes, in the Old Forest.
So he is in Arnor as well.
That's right. No.
Yeah. I don't know a lot, apart from there's not much forest left there than there used to be. Because it's all split and divided.
That is kind of correct, yeah. There was a lot of deforestation that the Númenóreans did. So, yes, we will talk about that as well. Okay.
I think, is it arid land where you can, like, is that a word?
Do you mean arable?
Arable land.
Yeah, a lot of, like, crops and stuff.
Farmable land.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's not like other areas that are rocky and yucky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want any chips?
Stop! Give me your phone.
No, I'm ordering it now. Do you want any chips?
Yes, but I want your phone.
Well, that's where all my notes are.
Oh my lord. Why would you do this? What if I want something different for once?
Well, I've got vegetable chow mein, curry sauce and chips. God. Right, take my fucking phone. See, I've already broken the swear words. Right, okay. Let's talk a bit about Arnor.
Okay.
If you've only watched the films or the books, if you've only watched the films, you would maybe be slightly aware of Arnor, but you would mostly be aware of Gondor. So the easiest way to think about this is that humans, in the height of their power within Middle-earth, not Beleriand, not Númenor, they had two kingdoms in the very end of the Second Age and all of the Third Age. Most of the Third Age. The southern kingdom is Gondor. That is where, if you watch the films, you would think, right, that's what Aragorn gets made king of. That's all of the human lands. That is not quite correct. Gondor is one half, and in fact, it's the smaller half of the United Kingdom, Rule Britannia. It's of the United Kingdom. So the North Kingdom is Arnor. The Southern Kingdom is Gondor. Arnor is where Elendil, so you know Isildur from the films and stuff, like Isildur destroy it? No. Isildur's dad is Elendil, and he's called Elendil the Tall. He's one of the massive ones. When they came to Middle-earth, Elendil landed in the north because they got separated while they were journeying. When Númenor fell and it was like crushed beneath the waves by Eru Ilúvatar, that Elendil and his sons got separated. The sons, Anarion and Isildur, landed in the south of Middle-earth, where they founded the realm of Gondor. Elendil landed in the north. He made friends with the elves who live there, Gil-galad and the other elves of Lindon, and he then founded the northern kingdom of Arnor. Together, they are, when Aragorn takes his crown, he gets crowned in Gondor, but then later he goes and he takes ownership of the North Kingdom. And Aragorn becomes king of the reunited kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor. So today, we're going to talk about this northern part. It's very, very old. It goes from the end of the Second Age all the way through to the Fourth Age. And there is a long period in that time where it is completely abandoned due to what? Due to decline in population, surprisingly. And Arnor is also a very interesting kingdom in the fact that it splinters into three smaller kingdoms, which we'll also talk about. So we're going to discuss all of this today. But for you, listener, hello, it will be one episode. But for us, it's going to be multiple days, multiple recording sessions, because there's a lots of kings of Arnor. There's also places that I want to talk about as well, like the Barrow Downs, which are part of it. I want to talk about Weathertop. I want to talk about Angmar, if I can. I want to talk about this and that and all that kind of stuff. So now that Becca took her sweet time ordering her food and then didn't really add anything to the order, and I've just reminded myself why I don't order Chinese, because it's disgustingly expensive, let's get on with the episode. So, put simply, Arnor is a human kingdom that covered most of the northwest of Middle-earth in this Third Age and towards the end of the Second Age. It was founded by the survivors of Numenor after Numenor was destroyed, so it was the descendants of the Numenorians who founded the kingdom. Elendil at all, as I've already mentioned, along with help from the elves in particular. Now, one thing I didn't realise about Arnor was that the bad guy, quote unquote, the bad guys tended to gravitate towards the south anyway. So
the Numenorians are humans.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are the humans.
Factions of...
Yes, the Numenorians are the humans who, at the end of the First Age, they had helped the Valar and the elves in the war against Morgoth, so they were rewarded with their own island off the coast of Middle-earth. They became the great human power in the Second Age. In fact, the great power of the world in the Second Age. They went on a steady decline. They started to reject the Valar, reject the elves. They were seduced by Sauron, which led to their downfall when God himself sank their island, Atlantis. The survivors of that are who we're going to talk about, and their descendants. So the borders of Arnor extended from the Gulf of Lune in the west, which you can see there's a gap in the mountains where the water comes through, and that the Gulf of Lune in the west to the River Greyflood and the Loudwater, which were just west of the Misty Mountains. So between two mountain chains is this country, essentially, and it's bordered by rivers and stuff. The Gulf of Lune is a big body of water that divides the Blue Mountain chain. And the Blue Mountains, as I've mentioned, are called Ered Luin, which is also called Ered Lindon, meaning the Mountains of Lindon. They also get called the Mountains of Lune. And because Noldor elves live there, so think, Galadriel and her people, Feanor was in Noldor, like those tribes of elves, they have their own name for it. And they called it Lunorodrim and Lundirien, meaning Blue Towers. Quite a poetic way of putting it.
So this might be a segue. Well, it is a segue. So where is Legolas from?
He is from Mirkwood, Greenwood the Great. And Legolas descends from the Sylvan elves, who are descendants of the Teleri, who was the third tribe of elves to awaken. Do you know the ones who, when they were all journeying westward, they took forever?
So he's not part... He's part of...
No, not really. No. He's part of Rovanion.
Right. For some reason, while I've been reading the book, been thinking he's from like higher up in the north.
No, he's from Mirkwood. His dad is Thranduil, who in The Hobbit is the one who captures the dwarves. And
it makes sense that he's so good running over mountains and stuff, though.
Well, yeah, it's on his doorstep.
So fast.
It's on his doorstep.
He's got loads of practice.
It's really interesting. Legolas would be an interesting episode not because of him as a character, because I find him quite boring, and Tolkien himself also said that Legolas kind of like achieved the least of the Fellowship members because the elves can't do...
he didn't have to...
By the time the Third Age comes around, the elves don't really do much, and that's the point of them.
What's his motivation, really?
The only reason he was at the Council of Elrond was to tell them that Gollum escaped. That was the only reason he was there.
Yeah, like he's not fully invested because...
He's not... Well, no more than anybody else in the world, but his parentage is interesting because those are kind of like... I'm not going to say the word mongrel, that's disgusting, but he's kind of like a mix of... Like, Sylvan elves are interesting.
He's a lower class elf.
He's not a Noldor. If you were to rank them, he's not a Noldor, he's not a Vanyar, he's not even strictly like a pure Teleri.
He's a ding elf.
Maybe, yeah, maybe, like, yeah. Is Legolas is Legolas a hillbilly of elves? Because the Sylvan elves are a very interesting... They are very interesting because they were a rusted branch of the Teleri who stopped on their great journey, so they never saw Valinor, so they technically are dark elves. We've covered the Morroquendi, I think. But then Galadriel and like Thranduil came from Beleriand as well, though. So Legolas himself might not be as much of a hillbilly as we think, but the elves they live amongst in Greenwood, because like Galadriel, Thranduil, they rolled into Lothlorien and Mirkwood respectively, and were like, I'm running this shit now. So yeah, like he lives amongst the Nandor. So maybe he's like one of those really rich kids who goes like, I'm going to live off grid, and then goes to live in like Slab City up in LA or something. It's just like, I can do this. But we don't know much about Legolas's mum. So maybe he's half hillbilly. Who knows? Who knows? That's a very, 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 very good question, because Thranduil was Sindarin, was a Sindar elf, but I'm hazy on the parentage. Because I'm pretty sure he did live in Doriath, Thranduil, in the first. Like, he is around in the first age. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was
That's for another episode.
He was Sindar. Yeah, he was Sindarin. Who were oh shit, what's that king called who got himself killed by the dwarves? Thingol. He was of Thingol's folk, so he does come from the Teleri elves. Right. Okay. I've got it clear in my mind. Right. So Thranduil is one of the Sindarin elves, who are the Grey Elves, who didn't make it to Valar, to Aman. They didn't cross the sea, but they did live in Beleriand, and because of that, they were exposed to Melian, so they became the Grey Elves, because they saw the light of the Valar reflected in her. After the first age, he then moved to Greenwood the Great. Legolas may or may not have been born around this time anyway. I don't know much about Legolas's mum, so I'm going to generously say Thranduil was a colonizer and Legolas is a bastard child of a colonizer.
Okay.
So if you look at any British colonial times where like some of the kids run around like half Indian or half Chinese or something.
Oh, yeah.
And Thranduil's there with his massive musket and his red jacket on going, boys! This really got off track. How the funk did we get here? Jesus.
What happens when you're trying to teach someone?
Yes. Right, let's go. We're not even meant to be talking about elves.
I know, well, I told you that.
Let's talk about the humans. So we were talking about the mountains that make up the western side, the western border of Arnor. Good Lord. In Quenya, the Blue Mountains were called Lunaronti. And these mountains actually these are one of the mountains that predate Middle-earth as we know it, because this mountain chain was also present in Lost Tales, and in that he called them Hewengabjorg. So Lost Tales was a much more Anglo-Saxon, Arthurian legend-inspired Middle-earth. And fun fact, the book I'm writing at the moment, which you'll be pleased to know, most listeners will be pleased to know, has about 90% less sex in than my first book, and is much more high fantasy, is an Anglo-Saxon and Germanic-inspired world, as you've seen from bits you've read of it.
Mm-hmm.
So names like this, to me, I'm like, ooh, because I use like a lot of Germanic and Anglo-Saxon names when I'm naming things. By the by. So going back to the Gulf of Lune, the Gulf is a big body of water that splits up the mountain chain. It's still the Blue Mountains all the way down,
yeah,
but it just splits it up. And the reason the Gulf is there is the War of Wrath, which is the last war of the First Age, where Morgoth is defeated for good. During that war, that is when Beleriand is sank into the sea. That is what causes Beleriand to be sank. The continent, so all you can see on my map there, I've got a custom map of Middle-earth with Beleriand and Numenor. Everything left of the Blue Mountains there disappears underneath the ocean, and you get some prime beachfront property if you live in that mountain chain. Part of that was the Blue Mountains were smashed down in the middle, which caused the Great Sea to rush in and create the rivers and stuff, right?
Okay.
Or add to the rivers. And so the Gulf of Lune was created when the sea broke through the Blue Mountains. Can you imagine a more terrifyingly apocalyptic event than looking out one morning at the mountains and seeing a massive gap in the middle of them and the sea coming towards you? I have nightmares about stuff like that. That is terrifying. 2 nightmares I have in my life periodically. One is of a giant wave of water rushing towards me when something floods like that. And the other one is of the moon turning out to be a giant egg and it hatches and there's something inside it.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's two terrifying nightmares I've had over the course of my life. And I keep having it. Like, every few years I'll have it again. And I'm just like, I wake up like...
Mine's that teeth one.
What, when your teeth fall out?
Yeah, and like chunks of my mouth are falling out and I'm like spitting out teeth into my hands and the blood's pouring through my fingers. And then recently, which I think's work related, is the out of controlness of the car. So I get in a car, I'm trying to drive normally, and the car just whizzes off and goes in, and that cause crashes, and I'm going backwards, and Yeah.
Which is interesting because, like, you're not a NASCAR driver, but you are in funeral care, so you're creating work for yourself with that. But the reason I'm going on about the Blue Mountains so much is the Blue Mountains actually have an interesting story to them. The Valar specifically raised these mountains in order to protect themselves from the rest of the world. So when they were shaping the world and Morgoth started acting the fool, they raised the Blue Mountains as a way to push the rest of the world away from them. So you also saw that, on the shores of Aman, the continent where they live. They raised the Pelori Mountains, I think.
So they make it.
They keep making mountain chains to keep people away from them.
Yeah.
It was to keep Morgoth away, and my note here is they literally pushed the land away from Valinor so they could extend their beachfront property. Those selfish pricks. And I'll read you an excerpt from Tolkien. For their further protection, the Valar thrust away Middle-earth at the centre and crowded it eastward so that it was bended. And the great sea of the west is very wide in the middle, the widest of all waters of the earth. The shape of the earth in the east was much like that in the west, save for the narrowing of the eastern sea and the thrusting of the land thither. And beyond the eastern sea lies the eastern land, of which we know little, and call it the land of the sun. And it has mountains, less great than those of Valinor, yet very great, which are the walls of the sun. By reason of the falling of the land, these mountains cannot be descried, save by high-flying birds across the seas which divide them from the shores of Middle-earth. And the thrusting aside of the land also caused mountains to appear in 4 ranges, 2 in the Northland and 2 in the Southland. Those in the north were called the Blue Mountains in the west side. So he's talking about the formation of the Blue Mountains and the Misty Mountains here, right? And that there are other mountains as well. I think there's the Yellow Mountains and the Red Mountains at some point as well. Because I think, is it blue, grey, and blue and grey are in the north, yellow and red are in the south. These 4 big, massive mountain chains that divide the world. But Arnor is notable in history. So now we'll move away from the mountains because I just found all that fascinating. But Arnor is notable for something I mentioned earlier. It splinters into 3 lesser kingdoms because of civil war and strife and basically younger sons not being able to wait their turn, basically. The Kingdom of Arnor was founded in the year 3320 of the Second Age, and then it was splintered into the 3 kingdoms of Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur in the year 861 of the Third Age. It was then abandoned as a kingdom in the year 1974 of the Third Age, and wasn't reformed until the year 3019 of the Third Age, where it was merged back into the reunited kingdom, Rule Britannia. So, given that the Second Age lasted 3,441 years, that means that the Kingdom of Arnor, in its messed up state, ran for about 1,995 years till it was abandoned, and then after it was abandoned, it stayed abandoned for about 1,045 years. So, more or less holds on by a thread, including splintering, for just under 2,000 years, stands abandoned for about 1,000 years before Aragorn reunites it, and him and his heirs rule down the line of history until wherever. Yeah, so okay for 2,000, abandoned for 1,000, pick back up, and away you go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So 2,000 years of history, essentially, we're going to talk about before there's about 3,000 years of history total, 2,000 where there's kings to talk about.
1,000 where people are just doing what they want.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to get into some other stuff today because we've got room to breathe with this being a mega episode. I heavily advise you to use the chapters. And also, I shouldn't be saying this late into the episode, please follow, like, engage, whatever you can do with the podcast. It really, really, really helps us. We don't monetize it, but we do want to bring Tolkien to the masses, especially for a huge subject like this. So, that was the intro. That's the
Jesus Christ.
That's the introduction. We're going to talk about Arnor now, before the Númenóreans get there. the pre-Numenorian inhabitants of...
BN. Before Numenorians.
Hey, that's good, that. Yeah, BN. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. So prior to Elendil and his sons getting there had been some population shifts in the region that would become the Kingdom of Arnor. And it's one of those cases where you think, like, oh, what happened to the people who already lived there? Why was Elendil able to make himself king, etc., etc.? Because naturally, if I said, yeah, people already lived there, and then he turned up and said, I'm your king now, you'd be like, what? How? Why? But it turns out there is an answer to that. And the answer lies in Numenor. So during the reign of the Numenorian kings, these were long-lived humans who were... The first king was Elros, who was the brother of Elrond, and they had the choice. So Elrond had the choice to stay an elf, and Elros had so Elrond and Elros were twin brothers. They had a choice. That's why Elrond's called the half-elven. Elrond's bloodline could choose to become mortal. That's why Arwen's able to do that and die. Elros was his brother, and he chose to become a human. He chose to become mortal, and he ruled Numenor as their first king. So fast forward about 2,500 years, fast forward a few hundred years, sorry. And around the fifth king of Numenor is called Tar Meneldur, and his son Tar Aldarion. By the way, Aldarion is one of the contenders for the worst dad in Middle-earth, by the way, and worst husband. Absolute shitbag of a person. Elros was the very first king of Numenor.
King of human people.
He was the very first king of the humans of Numenor.
Human race. Okay.
The Numenorians.
Okay.
The people who went to live on Numenor. Anybody else who was left on Middle-earth? Not really. But, you know, I can hear the ice cream van.
Yeah,
Damn.
me too.
Every time we're fucking busy. I shouldn't swear. Sorry. Every time we're flipping busy. So, under Tar Meneldur, and Tar is just an honorific for the Numenorian kings. Tar Dash is in the same way that Aragorn is the honorific by the time it gets to him. Tar just denotes that it's a king of Numenor. So under Meneldur and Aldarion, a slow migration begins to happen where this is when the Numenorians start to leave Numenor and they start to visit Middle-earth like in earnest. And there's passages where at first they come as teachers and friends, but then as things get worse, like the Numenorians become worse and more corrupt, they instead turn into colonizers and tyrants.
Okay.
Okay?
I just always thought, for some strange reason, that was like an elf place.
No,
But
humans.
I think
Aragorn's
I'm going right back to the beginning. I might have to refresh my brain.
Yeah. Aragorn is descended from the kings of Numenor. So when they talk about the Dunedain, the men of the West, they're talking about those who have the blood of Numenor in them.
Right.
The blood of Numenor is the humans who first settled on Numenor as a reward for helping the elves and the Valar against Morgoth. So under their fifth and sixth kings, Numenor's natural expansion sped up out their island and they were in the world at large, right? They began to treat with people of Middle-earth, they began to explore, and Aldarion was a famous traveller and explorer, and that's what made him such a neglectful dad and husband. He was always off at sea. He was always away.
Was he playing golf?
And his dad, Meneldur, was particularly known for being wise. And he was wise enough that when a situation occurred that he couldn't deal with effectively as a king, he abdicated his throne to Aldarion in order for him to deal with the rising menace of Sauron in the Second Age. Gil-galad wrote a letter to Tar Meneldur saying, so between the years 700 and 883 of the Second Age is when this bit occurs with these two kings, right? People were slowly migrating, and there's now Numenorian colonists who are interbreeding with other humans on the mainland for over 2,000 years by the time Elendil gets there. So that's the quick answer of why was Elendil able to make a kingdom there. He had the home crowd advantage, right? And yeah, going back, Meneldur abdicated to Aldarion because Gil-galad wrote to him, said there's this dodgy guy Sauron who is a rising menace. Tar Meneldur said, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I should help the elves, if I should commit like military fleets. Like Numenor was the most powerful navy in the world. I mean, it sounds very much like Britain, right? He didn't know what to do, so he abdicated to his son. He said, "I'm sorry, son. You're much more worldly than I am. You've made friends with the elves. You know what's going on. You're best equipped to deal with this." And he abdicated. All in all, a very wise thing to do.
He had
Especially
the strength power, not the mind and public relations.
Well, no, he was just wise enough to know that he wasn't the best person equipped to deal with that, because Aldarion did go out into the world. He explored everywhere in the world, and he knew what was going on better than he did. And so he said, "Right, it's your time." And it's stark contrast to later on in the Númenórean history, when they start clutching onto power until death, which not good.
Like, I literally 5 seconds ago thought, imagine if the Queen had done that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking, what was her motivation apart from just being the longest reign, reigning monarch? Because
now they only abdicate when there's fucking allegations, don't there?
But actually,
well, not even then.
The most compass mentis out of a lot of leaders in our world who are older, who live over the pond.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When they get to a grand age, at least she had all her marbles till the very end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, exactly. It took a scandal before Joe Biden stepped down, and I don't think Trump will under any circumstances. It's just fucking crazy.
Anyway, but
so the Númenóreans were out on the mainland, right? And who were these Númenórean colonists breeding with? I didn't hear you ask, but you should have, so I'm asking for you. That's where...
Why do you keep looking down my dress?
Because I can see up your dress. It's lovely. I can see like a load of thigh. I am your husband.
You're talking about breeding?
I am your husband. I may look upon thy thighs. Anyway, talking about breeding, who were these Númenórean colonists breeding with? And this is where we come across today's distasteful topic that made me lose my mind when I went down a bit of a rabbit hole with it. They called them the middlemen. That's the Númenórean name for these people, the middlemen. And the middlemen, I don't like this term. The middlemen are people who are not of Númenórean blood. They are not descendants of Númenor. The Númenóreans and then the Dúnedain, their descendants, they have a habit of derogatory names for people that stick. So middlemen's one, and let us not forget the other one, which is halfling. Halfling is a derogatory term for a hobbit. It is like calling a hobbit a darkie, right? It is not good.
Like half-caste.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a slur, right? Because you're saying you stand half the height of a Númenórean. That's what they're saying.
So why did you fuck them then?
I don't think anybody fucked the hobbits. The middlemen, they did. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Why did you?
Why are they the quality to reproduce
but colonists, I mean, colonists have always done that, haven't they? Like,
true, like slept with their slaves and stuff.
No, in fact as well, like it's often, it can be used as a way to breed people out of existence. Like the civilizations that have been lost.
To dilute the
gene pool. Yeah. Like what was it? Was it maybe like the Taino people? Perhaps I think I'm trying to go off the top of my head, but there's examples here where colonizers have bred racial groups.
Long-term.
They've bred them out of existence, and it has happened. It's a way to destroy people. I'm not saying that's what happens with the Númenóreans here. I'm just saying this can be a consequence of it, right? But anyway, going back to the Númenóreans, they called them middlemen, but they also introduced the term halfling when they met hobbits. Either way, it's derogatory terms that stick. And I wasn't even sure, like, I tried to find the best example of one particular civilization who might be the worst at doing this. Pretty much every nation's done it. Pretty much every civilization across history got enough power, has colonized, has done shit like this, has made derogatory terms for people. So let's pick a good example from history. Everybody listening to this should know the term Philistine. I use it a lot. Right? I use it often in a jokey way. Sometimes I use it in a derogatory way still. But this is an example of a derogatory name for an entire people that stuck. It's still used as a derogatory term today, and it's from the Bible. And we're going to go on a little bit of an aside here as I explain the origins of the term Philistine, because it turns out it's actually quite topical in the news today. So I looked at a site called the Biblical Archaeology Society, who described the Philistines as an uncircumcised people with advanced technology and a formidable military. It sounds pretty like that sounds pretty good all around. Like, I don't know why that's a derogatory term, because like circumcision is genital mutilation. So what's the big deal? Like, but why is that a bad thing? The Bible's weird, right? But also, yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. I also saw a meme today that said a foreskin is like the hijab for the penis. Made me fucking howl.
Pretty much.
Yeah, anyway, so Philistine is an insult, and according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it is defined as A person who is guided by materialism and is usually disdainful of intellectual or artistic values, or B, and the one I use it for, uninformed in a special area of knowledge. So I use it often in a joking way that if someone says, oh, I don't know about that, I say, oh, you fucking Philistine. But these guys were portrayed pretty badly in the Bible and were seen to be in conflict with the Israelites a lot. So they were condemned as idol worshippers and soothsayers, which obviously in the Bible times was a pretty bad thing.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. So the Philistines lived around the area of Gaza, and they seemed to prosper during the Iron Age, which, from what I could see, the Iron Age was around the 12th to the 6th century BC, so about 3,000 years ago. And then they lost a lot of their autonomy when things like, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians were like more powerful people around them.
Yeah.
So the Philistines kind of faded away. And today, they've been bred out of existence. The Philistines aren't a distinct group, and they're not a distinct racial group anymore. But what we do have is two things. The first is that the term remains as a slur to describe someone who's ignorant or uncultured. The second, and this is crazy, modern-day Palestine is a corruption of the word Philistine. Palestine was called that as a way to punish the Jews. So allegedly, the Romans renamed Judea to Syria Palestina after a Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD, right? So the name was changed to insult the Jewish people by naming it after an old Jewish enemy.
They're like, no, this still exists and it's not yours.
So when I was 14, right, I was 14, I was out with my friends, just walking around doing stuff in the park, and I went to a pizza shop, and in the pizza shop, a guy walked in called Liam Perkins, who was like he was a fucking local horror, right? He was like a hard lad, like he was a lunatic, and he took a dislike into me that night, and he, unprovoked, right, he spat in my face, and he had one of those big saddle rings that people used to wear, the gold ones, and he turned his ring round and he punched me repeatedly in the face in the pizza shop, right? And the police were called because he'd mashed my face up, right? I was 14, I didn't know how to fight or anything like that. And he really fucked my face up. And the police took like fucking photos of my face, and he went to jail eventually. Not for that, but because he stabbed a guy a couple of weeks later. And that would be like, after Liam Perkins went to jail, that if I then called my mum a fat bitch, she renamed my bedroom to the Liam Perkins room. And like, she was like, you're grounded, get to the Liam Perkins room. That's what happened. That's what happened
with the pizza shop then renamed their special Liam Perkins.
So that is the story of the Philistines. Like, they weren't a group anymore, but they were historical Jewish enemy.
Yeah.
That when the Jewish people revolted against the Roman Empire responded in an administrative capacity.
Yeah.
By renaming it. They named it like, go and live where your enemies were, you fuckers. Which is just like, whew. So that's why we call it Palestine now, because it comes from Philistine and the Romans renaming it to Syria Palestina as a punishment.
Interesting.
So we've got two things from that. So thanks Philistines. We've got two things. We've got a fucking cool insult and we've got Palestine. Good on you. So I'm saying all this is alleged, right? Because I can't really trust any of the sources when it comes to anything to do with Palestine or Israel. So maybe I'll revisit this in a couple of thousand years when things have died down a bit. But we'll go back to Middle-earth where it's a lot safer, right? Middlemen is a slur. It is. It's a Numenorian term to describe humans who are related to the Edain, as in the people who made it to Beleriand, the humans who made it to Beleriand. who were the ancestors of the Númenóreans themselves. So it's like us calling someone a Neanderthal, actually. We have a common ancestor. Please tell me we have a common ancestor with Neanderthals. I think we do. Were we Homo sapiens? Was a Homo erectus the other one? Or were we Homo erectus?
I don't know.
Anyway, assuming that I'm right and that we've got a common ancestor with Neanderthals, I think we do. That is the Númenóreans saying they are distantly, we come from a common ancestor, but they're lesser than us. They won't survive, right? And remember, Númenor was founded by humans who helped the fight, so again. But the middlemen came from the humans who didn't go to Númenor. So they did fight in the war at the end of the First Age, but they didn't go to Númenor. They spread out and they settled elsewhere in Middle-earth. That's why they call them the middlemen. And what all of these groups have in common, all of these humans, is that they were all part of the humans who fled Morgoth's influence when they woke up in the east of the world. So when humans first woke up, big groups of them left to go west. Lots of them made it to Beleriand, some of them didn't, like people who settled in the White Mountains around Gondor, for example. But all of them have in common is that they fled Morgoth's influence. The ones who didn't became the Easterlings and the Haradrim and stuff like that.
Okay.
And that's, that's by the by. So these middlemen came west, but for one reason or other, either didn't make it to Beleriand or didn't go to Númenor after making it to Beleriand. It's a shorthand way. Anybody who gets called a middleman means you're all right. Well, I'm not saying it's you, mate. I'm not saying it's all of you. I'm just saying I've got friends who are middlemen. I'm not saying it's all of them. You're all right. It's just the rest of them, those Easterlings and the Haradrim. But you're all right, though, mate. You're all right. It's that, right?
Okay.
It's you're all right. You're not like me, but you're still all right. You're one of the good ones, essentially. Just imagine a bald Cockney guy talking to a black fella. That's kind of the Númenorian middlemen relationship. So, I'm not saying it's you, mate. You're all right. Can I touch your hair? Stuff like that.
Gosh.
So if this is distinct from the Easterlings and the Haradrim because they stayed in the east and they migrated to the south and what have you, they were still under Morgoth's and Sauron's sway, right? I just want to cover that off. The term is also applied to any ally of the Dunedain in the second and third age, including the Rohirrim, which pissed me off the most. But we're not going to talk about that now. We're not going to talk about that too much because I need to chill out a bit because I've obviously got issues with social class and inequality. But the fact that their greatest military allies, the Rohirrim, who saved their ass on multiple times, in fact, arguably, Gondor might not exist in the Third Age had Eorl the Young not come to their aid, that they still have the term middlemen that is applied to their allies. It's like, you're not good, you're less noble than us. Fucks me off. That annoys
with their
me.
Beautiful complexions.
Yes, exactly. And the name middlemen was popularized by Gondorians themselves later on. So they might have called it other things throughout the years, but we'll use the quote-unquote contemporary term of middlemen. They weren't enemies, and this is the definition of middlemen, is that they weren't enemies, but they weren't so noble that they could be counted as the same people of the descendants of Númenor. That, I'm going to move on because that made me... Do you remember when I was researching this and I was sending like big screenshots into the group chat of our Tolkien group chat of like our friends where I was going mad about the middlemen slur and stuff? It just really fucking annoyed me. God, Tolkien and social class, man. Jeez, I know he was poor for a lot of his life, but like he was like still a southern twat. Sorry, guy. Sorry, southern twats. Anyway, it's said that these middlemen lived here and didn't answer the call of the Valar or Morgoth, or of Morgoth to fight for one side or the other, fell back into a primitive state. So we move away from middlemen, and we've now got the general going backwards of Middle-earth as a whole. That this is what Númenor saw the world as, that, they've all went backwards, right? And the quote I've got here from Tolkien is, Middle-earth and light and wisdom faded. The Dunedain dwelt under the protection of the Valar and in the friendship of the Eldar, and they increased in stature both of mind and body. So now we move away from the term middleman of being an ally, and we talk about Middle-earth in general, that any humans left in Middle-earth went backwards. Now, this is very important when it comes to colonizers, because This now says that they needed to be enlightened and advanced by the better people or the better race who came to show them the way forward, right?
Whose opinion's that?
That is Chris's opinion. Thank you very much for pointing that out. That is my opinion. I have very heated opinions on people who call the Noldor colonizers, because Beleriand is not the same. However, Tolkien uses the word colonizer specifically in terms of Númenóreans, so I will talk about that. But yes, it is my opinion that if you then talk about the people of the mainland going, like the people of other lands that aren't your island, going backwards and are primitive and need to be enlightened under the light of the Valar or the Eldar by you coming in your ships and teaching them better ways, that is almost for me one-to-one just fantasy British colonialism. But yes, you're right. That is my opinion. Take of that what you will. But also as well, yeah, it's probably a fair point. Like, yeah, if they did go backwards, because remember, like, we've only got Tolkien's word on this. Yeah, all right. Yeah, if they did go backwards and they needed advancing, and like without Númenor, they wouldn't have done it. Yeah, fair point. I mean, I'll rage at it from my own social fucking my working class point of view, but from the view of the story, yeah, Númenor was shit hot technologically. They advanced everybody, so fair enough. But also, so did Sauron. He advanced everything.
Yeah,
technologically.
it depends what the purpose is.
Well, exactly, because my very next point, and this is why we're married, because you read my fucking mind there. The next point to note is this motivation, because the Númenóreans were split into two camps by the time their downfall happened, right? One side was the King's Men. These were the quote-unquote bad guys. They rejected the elves and the Valar and were swayed by Sauron, leading to Ar-Pharazôn, who was their last king, attacking Aman and trying to claim the immortal lands for himself, leading to God, Eru Ilúvatar, splitting open the sea and drowning the whole nation of Númenor, right? They were the ones who generally gravitated to and settled in the south of Middle-earth, like, and they were the tyrants. And I think that's because the elves had a stronger presence in the north, so the bad Númenóreans didn't go to the north as much. Yeah, they would, there's passages about them returning to Númenor with ships laden full of treasure and stuff like that, right? Then you've got the faithful. These were the quote-unquote good guys. They remained the elf and Valar friends, and Elendil was part of this group and was spared from the downfall of Númenor along with his followers, and there was the famous 9 ships that they got away with. And the key part of it is that those Númenóreans who were the bad guys settled in the south, places like Umbar, other places further down the southern coast where the quote-unquote black Númenóreans, i.e. the evil Númenóreans, could later be found. And people like perhaps the Mouth of Sauron was speculated to be a black Númenórean. So it meant that generally the north was full of quote-unquote nicer people, nicer humans, who were allies of the elves, and so Elendil would have been more welcome there. And historically, as the split between the Kingsmen and the Faithful began to grow, the Faithful gravitated more towards the north of Middle-earth. Because this whole time that this is happening, it's not just Elendil and Isildur and Anarion rock up, and it's not Elendil just rocks up in the north by himself. Over thousands of years, Númenóreans have been settling here already, and they've been building families and growing. Like, some people left Númenor and never came back. Yeah. Like, they settled in Middle-earth, and because they were of Númenórean blood, they might have met a nice woman or a nice man and, you know, built families there, built communities, and that's what Elendil is coming into, a country populated by people who were more or less already friendly to him. Isildur and Anarion are, like, on the southern border of where they're still, like, welcomed and accepted. But obviously they've got Umbar further down the coast, so trouble's not far away. You've got Mordor in the east. So they probably had a bit of a tougher time for it.
So who's asked for Elendil then?
Nobody asks them. Nobody asks for it. It just happens.
And how is it colonisation when...
Elendil's not colonising it.
Oh, right, okay.
The colonisation's already happened.
Yeah, okay.
Elendil's just come to take up the crown, literally.
But it's been like an organic...
Not organic, but it's been a long period of time where they've been doing this. They come to trade, they come to do this, they come to do that, blah, blah, blah. But
it's no longer seen as like an invasion. because they're invaded.
It's already happened. It's already happened. Yeah, these people, they've already been there for thousands of years now.
Okay.
They've already mingled and interbred, and I imagine Elendil's just a lot of administration and unifying. So because the faithful gravitated towards the north of the Middle Earth, it also means that there's actually a lot of knowledge of the elves in the First Age that was preserved in the north. And by the time Elendil got to these lands that would become Arnor, a lot of the men of Eriador were either wholly or partly of Númenorian blood. So allegedly, they just welcomed him with open arms, which is, that might just be the nice historical way of saying it, but that's what the story tells us, and I believe Tolkien. So Elendil was separated from his sons because the seas were so stormy, and, swallowing an island will do that, I guess. So Elendil had 4 ships with him under his command, and he made landfall near Lindon, which is where Gil-galad lived, king of the elves, and I've got the Gil-galad banner there next to my sword. And Gil-galad and his elves lived on the western edge of the Blue Mountains. So this was prime breach from property now, because if you look at, see where Beleriand is on the map? If you take like a sliver of land all the way down on the left-hand side of those mountains, that's all that's left of Beleriand. And this now means that Lindon has, 1, probably got the best beaches in Middle-earth, and 2, it's the westernmost land on the continent where the elves lived. So Elendil sailed through here after escaping Númenor and came through the Gulf of Lune about halfway down the mountain chain and made friends with Gil-galad, who at the time was the High King of the Noldor. And after making friends with Gil-galad, he sailed up the River Lune, and beyond the Blue Mountains, he founded and built his kingdom. So he comes through the mountains, you see on the map? Comes through the mountains, up the river, at a certain point, steps out, and he says an oath in Quenya. Et earelo endorena utulien, se nome maruvan a hildinyaten ambarmetta. Out of the great sea to Middle-earth I am come. In this place I will abide, and my heirs unto the ending of the world. And thousands of years later, Aragorn repeats these words when he takes up his crown as the King of Gondor. So the men of Eriador accept the new kingdom that Elendil founds, and they then set about maintaining and founding places that to live, or had already been lived in that might have been neglected. They built shit up, right? The men of Bree became subjects of Arnor. So Bree, well, you know Bree very well. And if you recall from episodes past, I can't remember which episode it was. Someone will tell me, I'm sure. I mentioned that the men of Bree were most likely wandering Dunlendings who didn't like the fighting in Rohan, and so they went north and settled in Bree. And this might explain why, like, people like Bill Ferny having a bit of leftover mean streak in him and is like susceptible to Saruman's spying and stuff. But anyway, Bree people became subjects of Arnor, and Gil-galad and his elves would also aid this new kingdom, and they would do things like support with craftsmen and supplies and knowledge. So one of the tangible things that the elves did for Elendil was they built the towers on Emin Berid, which the name means Tower Hills, very literal. And these are alluded to quite a lot in the books. That when the hobbits talk about going west to climb the towers to see the sea and stuff like that. That's what they're talking about. So these were 3 white towers, and the tallest was called Elostirion, which held quite a special palantir, actually. So you know how the palantir allowed you to see what the other stones were seeing?
Yeah.
And they were all kind of like connected to each other, and you could see what was going on in Middle-earth, and that's how Denethor was driven mad by Sauron.
All you could see on that one was black.
Almost, actually. Well, kind of.
Just the inside of the mountain.
Well, no, it was the only palantir that allowed sight of Tol Eressëa. So it was the only, literally it was the only place where you could see heaven on earth, essentially. So Tol Eressëa being the island off the coast of Aman, which was the furthest place that even elves were allowed back to if they'd left. So Galadriel and that had to go back and live on Tol Eressëa. They weren't allowed back onto the continent of Aman because they'd been exiled and whatnot. So elves in the Third Age would actually go on pilgrimages to these towers just to catch a glimpse of the Undying Lands. So in the book, I think Gildor might have been going or coming back from that. Do you know when Frodo meets them?
They bump into them.
They bump into the elves, yeah. So no hobbit is known to have ever climbed these towers, but the hobbits in the West Farthing of the Shire, they had a legend that if you climbed the tower, you could see the sea, which you could. And that, to me, is a nice little mix of hobbit and elf stories, because there is a Palantir there that looked out across the sea when you looked into it, but it is debatable whether if you weren't looking into the Palantir and you stood at the top of that tower, could you see the ocean? Who knows?
And equally that the hobbits didn't actually go and test it out.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Actually, I'm quite happy here.
Yeah, the hobbits from the West Farthing are just talking shit. The same as, is it Ted Sandyman or someone at the beginning of Fellowship when they're all in the pub together? They're talking about seeing a tree that walks and stuff like that. They might be talking about an end, but they were like, oh, I don't know, I never saw it. So Elendil establishes the capital city of Arnor, which is called Anúminas. And in the south, Gondor was founded with Osgiliath as its capital, as well as the twin cities of Minas Anor and Minas Tirith, which Minas Anor means Tower of the Sun. It becomes Minas Ithil later on when the Witch-king moves in and wrecks the place. So what's weird to me, right, is that Arnor is the seat of the High King, so it's Elendil's seat, and therefore it is the kingdom that takes precedence over Gondor, like the Southern Kingdom. But Arnor was never as well populated, and it was never as powerful as Gondor. So, like, yeah, to me, I just thought it was just Tolkien being a typical Southerner, just give them the North shit. It's like, oh, it's not as many people live there, it's not as good as the South. Who knows? That might just be me. But Isildur was the oldest son of Elendil. We all know Isildur. And he held the High Kingship after his father died at the Last Alliance. But unfortunately, he only held on to the High Kingship for 2 years before he died during the disaster at the Gladden Fields, which kind of messes up ruling a kingdom when you're dead. So his youngest son, Valandil, became the heir to the throne of Arnor. And that's where Aragorn's claim comes from. Do you know the Aragorn claims he's a descent? So he claims the kingship of Gondor and Arnor, not just one of them. And that's where Aragorn's claim comes from, is Isildur's youngest son, Valandil, who stayed at Rivendell because he was only like 11 years old when his dad died. So when they all marched, so Isildur had 4 sons. When they all marched off to, when they were all like just marching around for war and shit, he stayed behind in Rivendell. So it was Isildur's bloodline that inherits the High Kingship of Gondor and Arnor. It wasn't his brother's bloodline. It wasn't Anarion. However, what's really interesting to me is that Valandil is the king of Arnor after his dad dies, and he's technically the High King of both kingdoms, like we've just mentioned, because he's Elendil's grandson. But he never tries to reunite the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor, and none of them try until a fair few kings down the line. King Arvedwi, who claims it by virtue of marriage to the High King of Gondor's daughter, but that's like thousands of years later. Like 2,000 years later or whatever.
So it splits when Isildur.
Yeah, so Elendil was Elendil was the first king of Arnor. Then Isildur was the second king of Arnor. Both of them are the high kings of Gondor and Arnor. They have ruling over both of them.
Yeah.
But when Isildur dies, his youngest son Valandil takes over. But Valandil doesn't say, I'm the High King of Gondor and Arnor. He just says, I'm the King of Arnor.
So Gondor's just led by stewards?
No, not yet. So Anarion was Isildur's brother. So Isildur and Anarion ruled together in Gondor originally.
Right, okay.
But then Isildur dies, and at the Last Alliance, Anarion dies as well. I think it's at the Last Alliance. No, his sons carry on. Gondor's its own episode, that's why I'm not going too much into it. Gondor has its own kings. the last king of Gondor before Aragorn tries to fight the Witch King. The Witch King says, "Come to Minas Ithil, 1v1 me, bro," and then he just disappears like a
Right.
jackass. That's the last king of Gondor till Aragorn. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So King Arvedui was the one who the next person who, in thousands of years in the future, tries to claim the kingship, but that doesn't quite work. Even though he is descended from a Isildur and it is his blood right, there's political shit going on in Gondor at the time. There's actually a civil war type thing that happens around there. And instead, the people of Gondor decide to choose the king's cousin instead of the rightful king from the north. That is a Gondor thing, though, so we shan't touch upon it here because, as you can imagine, both of these kingdoms are very well storied and quite complex politically. But I'm only going to deal with Arnor.
You're really selling that to me.
I know. As I was saying that, I was like, this is a podcast to explain everything simply, so I'm explaining it as simply as I can. Right. So, through the magic of editing, we are now pretty much the day before Becca gives birth, and you won't have noticed because my editing is seamless. But for her sake, my sake, and your sake, let's go over the geography of Arnor once more very quickly. So, picture Eriador, which is the northwest of Middle-earth, the top left of the map. Picture it as a big rectangle, right? On the western wall, on the left-hand side, you've got the Blue Mountains going down. Halfway down the Blue Mountains, there's some water. Big water. That's the Gulf of Lune. The elves of Lindon and Grey Havens live on that coast. That's where they live. The eastern side of this rectangle, the right-hand side of this rectangle, is the Misty Mountains, goes all the way down. Rivendell is tucked away into the foothills of the Misty Mountains. Two great roads cross the middle of Arnor. The East Road, which, as you can imagine, runs west to east, from the Grey Havens through the Shire and Bree to Rivendell, and the Greenway runs from north to south, from Fornost down to Tharbad and on towards Gondor. And these two big main roads cross at Bree. So that is why Bree is so important. That is why one village with one pub seems to be at the centre of a lot of stories. It's because that's where the two big motorways of Middle-earth intersect.
Okay.
And then Anumanas and Lake Evendim, Anumanas we're going to talk about in a sec, they sit up north of the north-south road. Cardolan is one of the splintered kingdoms, is in the south. Rhudaur is in the east. And Arthedain is the wedge in the northwest holding the capital. So when Arnor splits into three kingdoms, top left is Arthedain, top left is Arthedain, south is Cardolan, Rhudaur is the one on the right. And Rhudaur is the evil one when these three kingdoms split. But we'll get there in a bit. So let's talk about the cities of Arnor, because there's quite a few population centres. And it's really interesting because I say that so much, they're not super densely populated. Like, these were the capital cities, but they were never like Minas Tirith, they were never like Osgiliath, they were just... This one just got abandoned because there wasn't enough people to live there, which is kind of crazy. Like, it's depopulation empties a city. And it made me think, like, imagine if, like, New York City just stops being used and people move out of it. That's crazy. Like, it's... yeah. So Anumanas was located on the southeastern shores of a massive lake called Lake Nanuiel, which means Lake of Twilight. Or otherwise, you might have heard it referred to in the books as Lake Evendim, which is mentioned. And the lake was located 100 miles north of the Shire, and the Brandywine River flowed east out of the lake. So that's where the Brandywine kind of comes from, is this massive lake. And so I did some research with some of the guys in the Discord about how big the lake was, because it measured 50 miles north to south and 20 miles east to west. And turns out there are some massive lakes out there. So I asked like the Canadians and the Americans to show us of a lake, and you can't see the other side. It's insane how big it is. And yeah. And
bigger than the UK.
I mean, a lot of lakes are really big. So over the years, people dwelt around this lake, and allegedly, some of the elves, after the War of Wrath, at the end of the First Age when Morgoth was, defeated, they lived there. And some of the middlemen, which is a slur, lived there before Elendil rocked up in his boat. So makes sense, like people living around a big lake, fair enough. And in the year 1975 of the Third Age, the Battle of Fornost would be fought on a plain between the lake and the North Downs against the forces of Angmar, which we are going to talk about. So all those goth girls out there who love the Witch-king of Angmar, you're going to love this episode because I've got a whole section on that country. And go back to the city. Anuminas means Tower of the West. From Sindarin Anun, west, and Minas, tower. Minas Tirith, Minas Arnor, etc. And it was founded in the year 3320 of the Second Age by Elendil, and it contained one of the 3 Palantiri kept in the North Kingdom. So because it's the capital, it gets a Palantiri. And it also holds the scepter, the scepter of Anuminas, which was a symbol of office. And if you remember from our Sauron episodes, I can't even remember if you were there for the Sauron episodes. I think you were. I can't remember. Did you do the Sauron series with me? It was like 9 episodes. I can't remember. We've done so many episodes.
I just think it's bad timing as well to ask any sort of questions.
Anyway, the Scepter of Anuminas, it comes from Numenor, so it was a symbol of office that the Lords of Andúnier kept, and these were like the officials who kept. When things were going bad in Numenor, the Lords of Andúnier stayed friends with the elves, essentially, even when it was illegal to do so. And afterwards, it became a symbol of kingship in Arnor, which is pretty cool. And allegedly, the battle lasted, the last alliance between elves and men, where they all went to fight Sauron in Mordor, and then the disaster at the Gladden Fields, where Isildur died, that resulted in such heavy losses for the Dunedain that the city dwindled and declined enough that it became abandoned. And this is frustrating as heck, because I'm trying not to swear, as heckin' heck. Tolkien, just out of the blue, says, in the year 861 of the Third Age, the new capital Fornost is discussed, and the kingdom fractures in 3. So we have no idea. In between 900, like 800, 900, 1,000 years, there's like a gap. There's like a gap of about 1,000 years almost, where Anuminas becomes depopulated, is abandoned, a new kingdom, a new capital city pops up, which is being used, Fornost, and then the kingdom splinters. Like, he just didn't think he was like, I don't want to write about those northerners that much, so I'll just leave that bit out, which is really frustrating. And there was a guy, so researching this episode, what was amazing was I found some cool as shit papers from like the 70s and 80s, like people wrote scholarly kind of like articles on Tolkien. And there was a guy called Robert Foster in a book called The Complete Guide to Middle-earth, originally published in 1971. He suggested that the city was deserted sometime between the year 250 of the Third Age and the year 861 of the Third Age. And the latter date is 861, is when the kingdom of Arnor splinters, and it's 3 sons of a king fighting it over it, and the kingdom just becomes 3 kingdoms. It's bullshit. But Robert Foster doesn't say why it was abandoned, and he doesn't say why he has that date between 250 and 861. However, the reason I trust him in him writing that is that Christopher Tolkien himself called Robert Foster's work and a, quote, admirable work of reference. So if it's good enough for Christopher Tolkien, it's good enough for me. It's one of those things where it's kind of, and it's really interesting, it's one of those Tolkien facts that seems to be lost to time. At some point, Robert Foster narrowed the date down further, so it gives us a 600-year gap rather than a 1,000-year gap, and he knew something that we didn't, and that knowledge has just been lost about why Anuminas was abandoned or when it was abandoned. Yeah, I think that's kind of pretty cool. And I've discovered one of my favourite names for a Tolkien city. Early names for Anuminas were Tarkilmar, which is pretty cool. I love that. Sounds like something out of like Stormlight Archive, the books I'm reading at the moment. And there was another one called Westermanton, which I'm not as keen on. It sounds like a sport.
I'm just thinking of Tarka doll.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Did you get some of that in the shopping today?
Yes.
Yes, I thought I saw a packet of it. And then there was also the name Torfirion, which was an Elvish name that appeared in a 1943 map of the Lord of the Rings. And it was on the western part of the first map of the Lord of the Rings. So these places go back. And that's all I know about Anúminas, the first capital of Arnor. That's it. Any questions before we move on, class? Oh, should we talk about Fornost?
Yeah, I like the name of this one, hopefully.
Fornost. Yeah, it's Anúminas.
Sounds frosty.
Fornost. It does, doesn't it? So Fornost, its full name its Sunday name is Fornost Erin, also known as Dead Man's Dyke.
Nice.
The ditch type. It's also known as the Norbury of the Kings, and it's the second capital of Arnor. And there is a place in England called Norbury in Shropshire. But the actual term, as best as I can tell, comes from the Old English meaning Nord, north, and burh, meaning fort or fortified place or manor. And I discovered something amazing, a new concept to add to my philology lexicon. Did you know that Tolkien was a philologist? But places that are named after their geographical features are called toponyms. And when I go on Grindr, I'm on top of him. So in the real world, some examples of toponyms or toponymy are Frankfurt, which means ford of the Franks, a Germanic tribe. An important river crossing ford for a Germanic tribe, the Franks. Oxford means ford for the oxen, or ford of the oxes, where the ox would cross the river.
Nice.
Now, are you ready for this one? This is fucking cool. Fricking cruel. Fricking cool. Manchester, city in the UK, is a toponym of Brittonic, Celtic, and Roman Latin mashed together. Man, or mam, comes from the titty-shaped hill that the original Roman fort was built on.
Nice.
So the Romans said,
A huge mammary.
that looks like, exactly, that's exactly it. It looks like a big pair of titties. So the hill that was called Mamusium, and when the fort was built, it added Chester or Castor to the name, which happens a lot in Britain. So any name with Chester or Castor, Lancaster, Chesterley Street, Chester, whatever, generally denotes that there was a Roman fort there. So Manchester was the fortified settlement of Mamusium. Tough titty hill. And this, so I read a paper by a guy called John Algeo, I don't know, Algeo, about the toponymy of Middle-earth. Now, he wrote this in 1985, and in it, he states in this paper that there are over 400 places in Middle-earth named in languages other than English that follow this pattern. And he also states that there are around 14 languages spoken in Middle-earth, and that because of that, this all plays a part in it. Which, because I kind of like live in and amongst the Tolkien stuff a lot of the time, I never kind of stopped to look at it from that level, and I'm like, holy shit, that's impressive. Like, his world building is...
So he's mashed real language with his made-up languages.
Well, it's just that a lot of Tolkien place names are... It's like place name, like it's named after its like features. So like there's places named after mountains and like hills and stuff like that, right? That's how Tolkien names things in the same way that we do. But he's also got these 14 languages that he made up. That they in those languages they use that naming scheme for geographical features. But anyway, that paper is really good if you do want to. Just Google John Algeo 1985 Middle Earth, and the paper will come up. It's really, really good. But I would take it with a pinch of salt, because language is very hard and confusing. So I might have misunderstood something. But in terms of Fornost, Tolkien uses Norbury as the Westron name, i.e. like the language they're speaking in Middle-earth. So he calls it the Norbury of the Kings, is like the northern fort. So Fornost Erin is a Sindarin name, and it's the Sindarin version of the English word Norbury. And Forn is north, Ost is fortress, and Erin is the plural word for kings, the singular being Aran.
So this is 14 different languages he's made.
Yeah, I think English might be one of them, so an Old English might be another, so maybe 12. But yeah, it's around, like, Tolkien had a lot of languages he designed, which is just blows your tits off. So that's a toponomy in that the Norbury of the Kings, in terms of Fornost is a toponym because it's North Fortress, Erin Kings, North Fortress of the Kings. It's just named exactly what it is. That up there is up there in the north is the Fortress of the Kings. It's a toponym. Similarities with other words that contain Ost in Middle-earth, for some examples, are Belegost, which you've heard from the first age, where the dwarves in the Blue Mountains lived, Nogrod and Belegost, the two cities that get strung together. So Belegost means strong fortress, which comes from Beleg, strong, Ost, fortress. Osgiliath also has this, except it drops the T, so it's just Oz, so it's Osgiliath. Oz refers to citadel or fortress, and Gileath meaning the host of stars. So it's the fortress of the stars, or the citadel of the stars, which is pretty cool. I like that. Fornost is about 100 miles north of Bree, sitting on the southern end of the North Downs, which is a range of hills in Eriador. And Fornost was most likely founded around the time Elendil got the kingdom going, as there's no mention of like previous Númenóreans living there. So it's one of those. It might have either been a small settlement that grew, or one they just went, "Yep, we're going to found a city here." Either way, it becomes the new capital sometime before the year 861 of the Third Age. I don't know. But given the fact that I've been playing a game called Anno 1800 recently, which, do you know the one I was playing? You said, "Oh, this looks fun," and I kept going broke. I'm not doing that now. I've now developed it into a big city by slowly just adding things over time, and I'll add like a factory or a house, and then I'll wait and see what my economy does, and then I'll add like a sheep farm, and then I'll add like a wool mill. Yeah, exactly. So it's just, but it's growing. It's growing. That's the thing, is I don't sit and say, "Here's a city. Here's how it's all going to look." I react to the needs of what I need at the time and just keep adding things. So maybe I could found a city like this. I don't know. But the turning point for Fornost came around the year 1 of the Third Age, like I'd mentioned. So because so many Dunedain had died during the war with Sauron when they all marched to Mordor, that the population dwindled, and as I mentioned, at some point before the year 861, Fornost is the capital. It then becomes the capital of Arthedain, which is the kingdom. It's the one that lasts the longest, basically, is that kingdom, and that's where Fornost is. So obviously the city doesn't move, and it's the kingdom of Arthedain, and it lasts until 1974 of the Third Age, when the Witch-king of Angmar takes the city of Fornost. So what's really interesting, we'll go on to it later, the Witch-king of Angmar, he's responsible for ending the line of kings in Arnor and Gondor. Like, he is much better at that than Sauron was. Which, I mean, there's something to be said there about the people who do the work actually, a bit more valuable than the managers who sit in their towers doing fuck all. But who knows? So the city falls. Fornost lasts until 1974, and the enemy, takes it in 1975. After it fell, so after the city was taken, it was called Dead Man's Dyke, and the people refused to go there, thinking it was haunted. Rangers would visit because they were all over the north, but there was very little information about it, and it said that they didn't like to stay there. So maybe it was just cursed, or, it just smelt wrong. Who knows? Aragorn rebuilds a Numenas, but it doesn't say when he becomes king, but it doesn't say if he rebuilt Fornost. So who knows if that got the same love? I don't know. It is absolutely fascinating to me, though, that we see so much of the south of the human kingdoms, that these are the two major cities of the High King's Kingdom, and we know that is as much information as I could dig up. It's just that. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a shitload around Lord of the Rings Online, but obviously that's just fleshed out by game developers. You know, they love the game, they love the books and that, but you know, they're still having to make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a mad one. There's people who absolutely love Lord of the Rings Online. I could never get into it. It's such a shame. Like, I know objectively it's a really good game, but it's just a bit too dated for me. Like, I've tried so many times to get into it and I just can't make it work. But shall we talk about a village you'll be a bit more familiar with? Shall we talk about Brie? The cheese. It's a very nice cheese.
Yes, please.
What is surprising to me is that Brie is possibly one of, if not the oldest human settlement in Middle-earth. Which is just like, what? And Brie is probably, I don't know, outside of the Shire, it might be one of the most well-known places in Middle-earth for people who've like seen the films or read the books. Like, you know, they're very well-known places. And it is probably the only example of humans and hobbits living together in the same place. Doesn't tend to happen anywhere else. And it's said that they generally keep each their own business, but that they recognize the others as a necessary part of how the village functions, which I like that. It's kind of like, you're you and I'm me, but we're both valuable.
Yeah.
You know, that rather than like, oh, we're all one and the same. Like, it's not recognize, celebrate your differences and, you know, learn from each other. The village is most well known for its inn, which is called the
Prancing Prick.
Yeah, the Prancing Prick.
The Prancing Pony.
Hell yeah. And this is where Frodo and the hobbits are supposed to meet Gandalf, but instead they meet the barkeep, Barleyman Butterby, and Strider the Ranger, who he convinces 4 little people to go with a dirty, dishevelled man out into the middle of nowhere. So, yeah. In that case, it turned out well. Every other case, that would have been stranger danger.
Gandalf's a pimp, really. Because he's just like set them up. You need to go to this place. I'll meet you there.
He sold them. I can procure 4 little ones for your parties, Mr. Elfstein. Strider will take them to Elfstein Island. We'll call it Tol Eressëa.
So how big is Brie?
It is. It's got about 100 houses, 100 stone houses that humans live in, but hobbits live on the hill in their hobbit holes. So Brie is around 40 miles east of the Shire, and it's built on the western slopes of Brie Hill. And the larger area around it is called Brie Land.
There's a good mutualistic relationship.
Oh, yes, it's very symbiotic. There's a nearby village within Brie Land called Staddle, and on the southern slopes of Brie Hill, pipeweed grows, which is very good. Hobbits and humans also live in Staddle, including the famous Underhill family, of whom Frodo travels under their family name. And then in the book, he gets to the Prancing Pony and they think he's like a long-lost relation, don't they?
Yeah.
Which is funny. The hobbit holes are burrowed in Brie itself, but they said that the hobbits don't build their holes below the roof line of the houses across from. Like, so the hobbits build in the upper part of the hill, essentially, so that they're not lower down than the houses.
Yeah.
Which is...
Not like rabbits.
Yeah, exactly. And the Great East Road runs through Brie and it had gates at both ends of the village, which are locked in at night and guarded. And outside of the village, just a little tiny bit, is the North-South Road. And it's like like I said, it's the place where these two intersect. And the Brie folk told themselves tales that they'd settled in Brie since the Elder Days, like the first age of Middle-earth. So by the time of the War of the Ring, that's over 6,000 years, which is like, that's a long time. In real life, we always talk about Cleopatra as being like 3,000 years ago. It's 3,000 years before that. Like, how much has changed? Like, ancient Egypt was, when did it...
More before Christ's time then. We're still like, we're only like 2,000 years
Yeah.
of this age.
Yeah, It's a mind-boggling amount of time. Like, so for example, so shout out to the Think Tankers podcast, by the way, my other podcast, go and check it out. I did the history of RPGs and like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and the oldest dice found is around 13,000 years old. And that to me is a mind-boggling amount of time. So this to me is all just kind of academic saying it, like it's just. But this Bree is a great example of a middleman settlement, and these were humans who first come westward, fleeing Morgoth, in like the beginning of human history. But they then settled in the valleys of the White Mountains in the south, where Gondor would eventually be. And then some of these people migrated north again and spread out, resulting in Bree. They had their own language, but they dropped that and adopted Westron, which is the language everyone speaks, the common tongue, when they became part of Arnor, sometime after the year 3320, when the kingdom was founded. And however, when Arnor split in the year 861 of the Third Age, Bree became part of Arthedain, which, as you're seeing, is the kind of this successful kingdom of the three. It's the one that endures the most. Bree was close to Weathertop, which was a hotly debated bit of land between these three kingdoms, and they fought and squabbled over it quite a lot because that was where a Palantir was kept. So it was always, they always wanted it. And Bree is, I think this is Chris speculation, full speculation. I think this is a case again of Tolkien working backwards, because to me, there's no real good reason that Bree would survive as long as it did, because it also survives the war with Angmar, which led to the fall of the whole of Arnor as a kingdom by itself. So the kingdom falls, but Bree still remains it remains untouched, essentially, being a massive route, a trade route, the east to west road, the north to south road. It's a big crossroads. There's one village there with one pub where everybody comes to meet, and somehow the Witch-king of Angmar left it alone. I don't know. Tolkien said that Bree remained protected by the Dunedain, because after the last king, Arvedui, dies, they no longer call themselves kings. They start calling themselves the chieftains of the Dunedain. So, who knows? The point is, Bree remains untouched, and it's one of the oldest settlements, which just blew my tits off. Just nipples in the garden was how it went. Yeah, it's just so old. What the fuck? What happened 6,000 years ago in our country? What was it? Dinosaurs? Yeah, this is dinosaurs. Yeah, good time to tell you. Me and Becca are creationists. Bree was prosperous and protected. It was also a meeting point because a lot of dwarves would travel along the east road on the way to the Blue Mountains. There was hobbits were around, so were humans. Don't think you saw that many elves in Bree. Probably. Might have just been like, what if to an elf, Bree was like the deep south of America? Like an elf's walking through is like, what you doing around here, boy?
They're all high.
Hey, boy. Or like, the beginning of the Rambo films, where the Watchmen would be like, you want me to give you a lift out of town, son? No, thanks. Come on, I know a great place just outside of town to do your grilled cheese. I love the idea of Deliverance, but with an elf. It's just an elf walking along the Great East Road, and all you hear is like banjo playing. Just getting bummed by two dwarves, a man, and a hobbit.
You're going down a hole.
Yeah, an elf hole.
Disgusting.
Right. It was a bustling village, and the Prancing Pony was a 3-story tall building in Bree that acted as a major news centre as it sat in the middle of the crossroads. I cannot labour that point anymore. Very important. There was the ford of Bruinen. So, you had the Grey Havens in the west, then you had the ford of Bruinen and Rivendell in the east, which I also think is terrible that Rivendell is one of the most hidden places in the world. But there's the one of two main roads in Middle-earth goes there if you follow it long enough. Not great city planning. That's not great planning. But because it ran through the Shire, it was ancient, and the Great East Road was said to have been built by dwarves, which I find very interesting. So that, like, I could easily imagine the dwarves in the Blue Mountains building that, and that's where Thorin and that live at the start of The Hobbit. Like, they've all fled from Erebor to the Blue Mountains. It's really cool. And so the Butterbur family had tended the Prancing Pony for generations, and it was at the Prancing Pony that I'm going to drop a little bit of Hobbit lore for you here. Allegedly, the Shire Hobbit Torbold Hornblower, also known as Old Toby, first learned about pipeweed, and he brought samples back to the Shire. And around the year 2670 of the Third Age, he was growing it in his garden, being the first reported hobbit in the Shire to do so. Now, there's a bit of point of contention, is that Bree hobbits like to claim that they were the ones who invented smoking it in pipes, and that they were the first to do it. Old Toby had a variant of pipeweed named after him that remained popular for a long time in the Shire, and the name Theobald means bold people or bold person. And I love that there's so much history from the Prancing Pony there.
I was going to say before, there'd probably be wizards who pass through the Prancing Pony as well.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Maybe the birthplace of weed.
It's always hotly... it's a bit debated, because Tolkien, I think he meant pipeweed just as tobacco, but Peter Jackson put a bit of the weed spin on it, whether intentionally or not, I don't know.
It's called pipeweed. I wasn't referring to it as like...
marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana.
I can't help it being quite similar.
True. And a real-world influence for the Prancing Pony may have been a pub called the Bell Inn in a place called Moreton in Marsh in the Cotswolds. Though there was research conducted by a branch of the Tolkien Society, who they said that Tolkien may have used it as a source of inspiration when he created the Prancing Pony, because that pub, the Bell Inn, also has 3 stories and an entrance via a courtyard, and apparently Moreton has similarities to the town of Bree. And there's a little plaque in the pub from the Tolkien Society saying that it may have been the inspiration for the Prancing Pony. And I had a look, and it looks like a pretty normal, nice pub. Like, it's on booking.com. Like, you can just go and see it. Like, there's I think it's like a Middle-earth mural on one of the walls, but it like, maybe it's our bias of us living in like semi-rural northeast England, but it looks like a lot of pubs that we've been to, just like really old, quaint, nice pubs. So, yeah, just one of them. Prior to the events of The Hobbit, Thorin and Gandalf met at the Prancing Pony on the 15th of March, 2941, and they discussed Smaug and the Lonely Mountain, blah, 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 blah. The ring was found, the dragon died. Around 12 years after that, from 2953 onwards, is when Saruman began to have agents in Bree spying for him, such as that bastard Bill Ferny, who Sam chucks an apple core at.
Yeah.
Which, I love that. Love that for him. And then, of course, the events of Lord of the Rings, etc. And when the hobbits returned back there after the War of the Ring, in October of 3019, Barleyman Butterbur tells them about the raid on the village and how Bill Ferny and one of the gate guards, Harry Goatleaf, let the attackers in, resulting in 5 Bree deaths. Bree and Staddle were raided by ruffians from the south in the late Third Age, humans and half-orcs working for Saruman. 5 people from Bree were killed, including 1 hobbit from the Underhill family, to which I'm sure Frodo was very, very sad. Yeah. And even though the Bree people won the battle, the attackers lived in the woods as bandits. And allegedly after the end of the story, Aragorn opened the Great North-South Road, which was called the Greenway. And it was called the Greenway because after it became disused when Fornost was captured and fell, grass grew over it. And Aragorn reopened that route into the north of the world, which it's really like mad and a bit mind-boggling to think that like the hobbits and then Aragorn are kind of traveling. If you're looking at the map, they're traveling to the right through Bree, and then they go toward Rivendell, so they go to the right. But there's like half a world to the north that nobody ever really uses anymore.
Yeah.
And Aragorn's like, no, we're going to reopen. Like, they're reopening a route to the world, which is just wow. And yeah, I've just got a note here that it's a pretty important place for the threads of fate to weave themselves together. It seems like Bree is one of those places where like a confluence of things happen, and it's just quite important. And the village of Staddle is a dialectical English name, which is derived from the Old English stadol, which means foundation, and occurs in real life English place names. And just to finish off this section, it makes me laugh, is that Bree means hill in Celtic. So Bree Hill is Hill, which is tautological. Like, it's just, yeah, and it was said to be the Bree Hill.
Like the Sahara Desert. Desert.
Yeah, pretty much. Or the, what is it, the LA Angels? The Angels. Like, they're the Angels. And there's also said that Bree might have been inspired by another village called Brill in Buckinghamshire. And I looked at pictures of it, and it looked a bit like Bree and how you'd imagine the surrounding land. So it's pretty cool. And just to finish off this section before we move on to some of the geography of Arnor. So we'll do the geography, then we'll do some of the kings, and we'll go from there. But we're reaching the end of where this is a happy story, because then we're going to go into the grand histories. But the rivers in Arnor.
I was going to say, what have we been talking about previously?
It's fun.
You're saying we're doing the geography now, but I thought you said we were doing the geography ages ago.
We're going to do more geography. So, the Baranduin River, which the hobbits call the Brandywine River. Yeah, you familiar with me? Is just golden brown river. So, Baranduin is golden brown Duin River. The hobbits' own name for the Brandywine is Brandanin, which is border water, which they then jokingly refer to as Bride Ahim, which is heady ale, after its colour. So the Grand Elvish river name, Baranduin, for Golden Brown River, gets turned into a beer joke by hobbits. The next one we're going to talk about is Weathertop, which is Amon Sul, which is where the chief Palantir of the North was. Amon Sul. So the Weather Hills, they stand near the centre of Eriador. So you think about the map of what Arnor looks like, or Eriador, a part of the continent where the Shire is. They stand near where the Great East Road runs east towards Rhudaur, which is one of the three kingdoms we're going to talk about in a bit. Amon Sul, which men call Weathertop, we'll notice where Frodo gets stabbed by the Witch-king and where Gandalf meets, he fights the Nazgul himself as well. Amon Sul was the tallest and the southernmostest and the highest of the Weather Hills. And it was a bare, conical hill rising about 1,000 feet above the land with a flattened crown, which is depicted quite well in the movies, I think. And Amon Sul is Sindarin for Hill of Wind, and Weathertop is simply the plain speech version of the Sindarin word. It's a wind-blown hilltop, like Roseberry Topping or Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh. More people will probably know that one more. If you've ever stood at the top of Arthur's Seat, it can get windy up there. A good friend of the show, Cal, I met up with him when he came over from America, and we climbed up Arthur's Seat together. And the whole way up, I was telling him about a man who went up there with his pregnant wife and then pushed her off as well, because you'd watched a documentary about it.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Very windy top.
So windy top. Arthur's Seat seems about right, I think, for 1,000 feet maybe. So, I think Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh is about an approximation of Weathertop, I think. So, to me, this is the single most important site in Arnor and its history after the capitals of Fornost and Annúminas. Elendil raised a great tower at Weathertop in the late Second Age, and in it he set the chief Palantir of the North, which was the largest and most powerful of the three northern stones, and this was the one that was used to speak with Gondor. So in the films, and this is a conception as well, In the films, the Palantir all look as if they're about the same, or you're given the impression that they're all about the same size. They're not. Some of them are so big it takes multiple men to lift them. They are big, big, big seeing stones. And from this hill, it said that Elendil watched for the host of Gil-galad when he was meeting up with the Elvish army before the War of the Last Alliance. So when Arnor split into 3 kingdoms in the year 861 of the Third Age, the tower and its associated stone passed to Arthedain. But all 3 kingdoms wanted Weathertop because of how important it was. And it sat on basically a contested frontier. It was pretty much the borders, and everyone wanted it. King Argaleb I fortified the Weather Hills against Rhudaur and Angmar, and he was slain there while defending the hill in 1356 of the Third Age. His son, Arveleg I, held the line for half a century, but in 1409, a great host out of Angmar surrounded the hill, killed him, and burned the tower of Amon Sul to the ground. The Palantir was rescued and taken to Fornost, but it was later lost with Arvedui at sea when the other stones were lost as well. By the end of the Third Age, and again, by the time we see it in Lord of the Rings, and this theme is everywhere once you point it out, post-apocalyptic, in decline, ruins everywhere, ancient ruins. This is how the hobbits and Aragorn find Weathertop again when they camp there, and the last kind of visit that Frodo has to the hill, or the last time we see it in the story, is 16 centuries after the Witch-king had broken it. So for him, it must have been a really nice nostalgic trip. Like, he must have been climbing up there with the others and be like, you would not believe how good this looked before I wrecked it. Like, he would have just been proud as punch the whole way. I like to imagine, ever since we covered, the idea of the Nazgul having a camp somewhere, I love the idea of them chit-chatting. Just...
yeah, like chilling around a fire.
Yeah. Well, not fire. They don't like fire.
Not a fire.
Chilling around a babbling brook.
Yeah.
And just... Then I covered Lake Evendim, Nanuiel. I covered that earlier, and I'll go over it here again very quickly, just for the sake of completeness, because I start writing the script, then later on I think of the idea of ordering it, and as part of it, as part of you telling me about Numinas, I talked about Lake Evendim, but I'll just kind of put it here when we're talking about the geography as well.
Is it that point as well where you start realising that you need more episodes?
Yes, yeah, it is. That is pretty much how it goes. So... Lake Evendim is a great lake in northern Eriador, 100 miles north of the Shire, ringed on its west and south by the hills of Evendim, and the Brandywine flows out of it. The name Evendim is English for evening twilight, which is a translation of the Sindarin Nenuial, lake of twilight. So Nen is water or lake, and Uial is twilight. And on the lake's southern shore, Elendil built Numinas, the first capital, which we've covered. And this water was the cradle of Arnor. And it bookends the realm's story, because the war that destroyed Arnor was also decided here. So the founding of Arnor and the ending of Arnor, until Aragorn refounds it, is in pretty much the same place, on the plains between Lake Evendim and the North Downs. The North Downs. What are these? They are a range of downs in north-central Eriador, and downs is like, what's downs? How would you describe downs? Because we have...
I was going to ask like a technical term for downs.
So, not Down syndrome, but it just means, it derives from Celtic meaning hill or hill fort. So downs, it comes from the Old English dún, which means hill, so it's just hilly country. It's a landscape of low-rolling, open, grassy hills, which we have quite a lot of in the north of England.
I think it's like moor-like.
It's almost like, it's a little bit gentler than a moor. It's like rolling, grassy hills.
Okay.
And there tends to be a lot of chalk soil around. I don't know why that is. But the North Downs... so the North Downs stand on the southern end. So north central Eriador is where the North Downs are, and Fornost stands on the southern end of it, which is obviously the last capital of Arthedain and therefore of Arnor. The plain descriptive English name is that down is the old word for hill, a low hill. That's it. But through the Angmar Wars, the North Downs was the heartland where the kings of Arthedain held when everything east and south had been lost. So they fell back to the hills, which I imagine might give some terrain advantage, perhaps. But Arathor cleared the enemy from Fornost and the North Downs after the disaster of 1409 of the Third Age, and it was here on the North Downs that Arvedui, last king, made his last stand in 1974 before he was driven north, where he later died. Don't worry too much about the names of the kings I'm saying now, because we're going to come back to them, so don't worry. And it's on these North Downs that long after, so in that 1,000 years or so, between Arnor falling and the War of the Ring, that trolls creep back into Eriador, and they spread as far west as the North Downs. And the Rangers of the North, so Aragorn's folk, by the time all this is happening, watch the country and try and keep them in check. So in The Hobbit, when they encounter the trolls, it's a symptom of this. Like, they encounter the trolls that turn into stone. It's like Bill, Bert, and Tom, I think. It's when they encounter them, it's them expanding their territory, which is a symbol of things being wrong in the world. We're still with geography, but we're going to talk about the wilder parts of Arnor and some of like the more haunted places. So this is where the Rangers of the North, the Dunedain of the North, would consider the most dangerous places in Arnor. And the major one is the Barrow Downs, which most people are tangentially aware of. The Barrow Downs are a line of low, treeless green hills east of the Shire and behind the Old Forest, southwest of Bree, and within the old realm of Cardolan. Now, Cardolan it's not the evil one, but Cardolan's really interesting because Tom Bombadil seems to have some connection with the last Prince of Cardolan. So, do you know in the book when he rescues the hobbits from the Barrow-wight, and he gets all the treasure out of the Downs? He gets all the treasure out of the Barrow, and he takes a brooch for Goldberry and says that it belongs to a lady. And
that's when they get like their little.
That's when they get the daggers. Yeah, the daggers that were made in Arnor specifically to kill the Witch King. And it seems that Tom Bombadil has some connection with Cardolan, which is really interesting. And the name is in Sindarin is Tín Gorthad, which means Barrow Hills or Downs of the Dead. And Tín, Tyrn. The Barrow Downs in Sindarin, the name is Tín Gorthad, which means Barrow Hills or Downs of the Dead. So Tín means mounds and Gorthad means wraith or spirit of the dead. And the English name is just like kind of old. Barrow is from Old English beog, which means mound, and down from Anglo-Saxon dún, hill, as we've just kind of talked about. So Barrow Downs is a bit of a tautological name again, because it just means downs of the burial mounds.
Tautological.
As in, it's like quite a circular name. So Barrow Downs. So if you combine, it's like Downs. It's so the undead that later haunt them, the Barrow-wights, are perhaps speculation Tolkien's version of the Norse Barrow dweller, the Draugr. So anyone who plays Skyrim, the Draugr, very common enemy in there. Maybe, they are spirits or beings that guard the gold in its grave. And these mounds were ancient even in the days of Arnor. And the Fourth Fathers, so the middlemen, had buried their dead there back in the First Age. And under the kings, they became a hallowed burying ground. And later, the Dunedain of Cardolan laid their lords there, including the last Prince of Cardolan, who died in 1409 of the Third Age. So Tom Bombadil was picking it up 1,500 years later? Just over 1,500 years later. And when the Great Plague of 1636, because it was a massive plague, remember, in the middle of the Third Age, finished off the people in Cardolan, the Witch King sent Barrow-wights into the empty tombs so that the dead themselves could keep the Dunedain from properly returning. King Araval tried to resettle the land in 1851, and the Whites fucked that attempt up. So he was defeated by ghosts, something the Scooby Gang have not been, ever. So the Downs sat abandoned, dreaded, haunted, like, for over 1,000 years.
Who sent who into...
The Witch King put the Barrow Wights there.
Right, okay.
He put the evil spirits there.
Right.
And there's actually like an older version of the Fellowship of the Ring manuscript where it describes that the Witch King went there and spent 3 days stirring up the spirits as a way to guard that in case Frodo went that way. And he did. So in 3018 of the Third Age, when the four hobbits wandered into the Barrow Downs after leaving Tom Bombadil, they got lost and were trapped by a Barrow Wight. And they were freed only when Frodo called for Tom Bombadil, because Tom Bombadil gave them a song in case they ever got stuck. And in the Barrow, Merry has this kind of dream where he wakes up, and it seems like he's living the last memory of that Prince of Cardolan who was buried there, because he's talking about the men of Carn Dûm coming forth. Bombadil rescues them, and he brings out the daggers for the hobbits, as well as there's that fact that they're naked, just kind of like running and rolling on the grass, which is always pretty cool. So yeah, it's nice though.
It's a bit of a like in the rugby dressing room type.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
Scene.
Yeah. So Bombadil takes a brooch for Goldberry. He says it belonged to a fair lady of that lost house, and it's a bit like, what's the story there? That Tom Bombadil seemed to have known people in Cardolan, which is pretty nice. So we covered the North Downs, but we've also now got the Etten Moors and the Cold Fells, and these are the troll country where Aragorn's dad dies, I think. So it's a bleak, rugged moor and valley country on the western side of the northern Misty Mountains. So it's north of Rivendell. And it includes the Ettendales, which are valleys running up into the mountains. And the Cold Fells lay in the same region between the Etten Moors and Rivendell. And they might have been a separate place, or it might have just been another name for it. So calling the Etten Moors and the Cold Fells the same thing. Might be somewhere slightly distinct, but who knows. Etten Moors just means troll moors or troll moors. The element Etin is from the Old English Eortin, giant, troll, ogre, and moor in its old sense of a high barren land. So it's a high barren land where you're going to find trolls or ogres or bad shit. It also gets called the Trollfells.
Trick.
Yes. My swamp. So Tolkien worked his way through various names through the drafts. He tried the Old Norse Bergrizi, which means hill giant.
Doesn't have the same ring.
It doesn't. He did settle on the archaic English form. So Cold Fells, obviously cold and fell, and the old fell is an Old Norse word for a high bare hill that we still have. Like, we have lots of fells around us because of where we live. And as I've discussed on my other podcast, Think Tankards, the northeast of England holds on to ancient language better than pretty much anywhere else in the country. So we still have a lot of that Norse influence in our place names and language. So, like Lowfell, Pelton Fell, places that are within a fair drive of us. It's all from like high bare hills, which makes sense.
We used to have highwaymen who went through the fells.
Yes. Oh, yeah, you did. I've got that book about crimes in Durham and Newcastle. Yes, you're right. So in the early days of Arnor, it was actually considered, the Etten Moors was considered a bit of a peaceful pasture on the northern border of Rhudaur, but at its heart it always was troll country. And as we discussed, the trolls bred and grew bolder once Angmar appeared on the scene, and the Witch-king of Angmar started messing things up, because the realm of Angmar is just north of the Troll Fells. So it is nearby, so they got bolder and obviously were able to strike out. After the Battle of Fornost in 1975 of the Third Age, the fleeing Witch King was overtaken and his army was destroyed in the Etten Moors before he could reach Carn Dûm. So the realm of Angmar effectively ended on the Troll Moors. So that's where that kind of pitched battle was fought, even though it did still result in the destruction of Arnor ultimately. And for the later in history, the Etten Moors were a deadly place that the rangers that the Dunedain patrolled. And trolls came back into Eriador about 3 centuries before the War of the Ring and pushed west, even though the Rangers tried to keep them out. And in the Third Age, 2930, hill trolls captured and killed Arador, who was Aragorn's grandfather, and he was the 14th chieftain of the Dunedain. So yeah, it was his granddad, not his dad. So Aragorn's granddad killed by trolls.
Okay.
Pretty bleak way to go out.
Mm.
Then we've got Tharbad, which is a fortified town and river port on both banks of the Gwathlo, the Grey Flood River. This is on the southern border of Arnor, where the Great North-South Road crosses the river between two kingdoms. And that just means it's Sindarin for crossway. And for a long time, Arnor and Gondor used Tharbad as a joint garrison. It's where like the one place that the North and South Kingdoms shared together, even though they weren't united for thousands of years. And in the Great Plague of 1636, half of the garrison, the northern half, just ceased to exist because Arnor was so badly depopulated. And Tharbad carried on until the floods after the fell winter of 2911 finally drowned it. And I think this might be the winter that Bilbo remembers from being a child, where it was the last time wolves came out of the north into the Shire. Like, it was a really, really bad winter. I'm pretty sure that might have been it, yeah. And it was, anyway, Tharbad was ruined and deserted in 2912 of the Third Age, in the days of the chieftain Argonwy. By the War of the Ring, it was a ruin again, unfortunately. And this one's going to come up again later. We've got the Ice Bay, so we're going north again. We're going back north. We're going to encounter the Inuit peoples of Middle-earth. This is the Ice Bay of Forochel, which is where Arvedwy dies, the last king of Arnor, the last king of Arthedain even. So it's a vast frozen bay in the far northwest, part of the northern waste beyond the bounds of Arnor. Its shores and the cape of Forochel were home to the Lossoth, the snowmen, the Inuits of Middle-earth, essentially. And these were a hardy people descended from the ancient folk of the north. Not much else is really said about them. We don't know if they've got like a common ancestor with the Eotheod, who became the Rohirrim, or anything like that. We just know that they're an ancient people, quite unlike most other cultures we see in Middle-earth, which is very... I like that.
Because they're prepared to eat each other.
I don't know. They might just eat whale blubber. I don't know. The Forochel in Sindarin means northern ice. Forod means north. Kel means ice. And it's just the cold at the top of the world. It's like their version of the Arctic, I guess. And that is where Arvedwy dies, which we'll come into that later. So a quick note before we get on to... I've got one more place I want to talk about. So Rivendell deserves its own episode, or something to do with the elves, but it's an important place where important humans were fostered by Elrond, those descended from his brother, so his great nephews to the power of whatever generation, right? So that Rivendell's its own place. But there was also the Angle, which is where a lot of the Rangers lived in the north. So this was a wedge of land between the Horwell and the Loudwater. So this was south of the Etten Moors and just near Rivendell, and it was once part of Rhudaur. And the Angle just means a land between two rivers. Stewart hobbits lived in this area for a while in the Third Age, before the early Third Age, before wars drove them out. So you've had humans there, and you've had hobbits there, and when Arnor was depopulated, they dispersed a lot, but a lot of them could still be found in this wedge of land between the Horwell and the Loudwater. It was the heartland of the Rangers in the north, and it still kept going, and it was close enough that they were able to guard Bree, and there's Aragorn that says about Barlim and Butterbur, he has no idea of what lays within like a day's march of his borders. And it's kind of like the Rangers' base from there. And I don't know where else to put this before we move on. But before we get onto the lines of the kings, I'll just tell you kind of what happened to the 3 Palantiri that were in the northern kingdom of Arnor. So the north started with 3, and the south had 4 to make up the 7. And in Gondor, the 7 stars on the flag represent the Palantiri brought from Numenor.
I'd forgot about that.
Yes. So you had a Numenas stone, in Anumanas, the Amon Sul stone, which was the big master stone, and the Elostirion stone out on the Tower Hills, which could see the Undying Lands. Yeah, the Amon Sul stone and the Anumanas stone both ended up at Fornost, and both were lost in the icy waters of the Bay of Forakel when Arvedui drowned. And that is their fate. Nobody could ever retrieve them. They were completely
he have
lost.
one in each pocket or something?
Yeah, they just weighed him down. Yeah, it's just he wasn't a very clever guy. Yeah, he was trying to escape with them, and he drowned. We'll get that when we talk about his death, though.
Okay. So they must have been smaller ones.
Possibly. No, one of them was the Master Stone, so it must have been pretty big. Yeah, so it was on a ship. He managed to get it on a ship, and the ship itself went down. He didn't just fall into the water. No, the ship got hit by ice.
It wasn't a suicide attempt, and he filled his pockets with Plantier.
I mean, I don't know. Arguably, could it be considered suicide if you ignore the really good advice of the people who know the country well, and they say, if you go in that water, you're going to die. You say, I think I'm going to go in that water.
Oh, it's that person.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
So, who knows? So, two of them lost in the water forever. And the third one, the Elostirion stone, only ever looked out west of the Undying Lands. That stayed in the tower the whole time. It stays out of the story completely. And it only leaves Middle-earth when Elrond does. But none of them are still in Middle-earth. They're all gone. And now, ladies and gentlemen, and all those wonderful pride flags in between, we are going to start the biggest part of this episode, which is the rulers of Arnor, or more accurately, the heirs of Isildur. Because there is a lot. There is a lot. And I'm doing the Gondor episode at the same time, and I'm doing that by myself. There's more in Gondor, I will say that. In Gondor, there's something like 33 kings and 26 stewards. I don't have to do as many here, but I'm hoping that the automatic chapters in Spotify and what have you do me a solid here. Because there are going to be some where nothing happens during their reign, but I said this was a mega episode, so I'm going to keep it there. I will tell you their names, their reign dates. So this is the pure history part of the podcast. So the North Kingdom, founded by Elendil in the Second Age 3320. Elendil was the first king. The line that runs through Arnor, the heirs of Elendil, is split into groups. So first come the kings of Arnor. There's 10 of them, from Elendil to Earendor. After Earendor, the kingdom breaks into 3, and the line continues as the king of Arthedain, which has 15 rulers, from Amleth to Arvedui. When Arthedain falls, the line continues as the chieftains of the Dunedain, with 16 leaders from Aranarth to Aragorn II, our Aragorn, who at last restores the kingship. So counting Aragorn, that is 41 rulers. The first 10 kings, from Elendil to Earendil, bear Quenya names, the High Elven tongue used in formal and royal settings. From Amleth, every ruler after that took on Sindarin names. And from Argaleb I onward, the names carried the kingly prefix of Ar or Ara, which means royal or high king. Because Arnor means royal land, just like Gondor means stone land. We are also going to talk about the failed lines of Cardolan and Rhudaur, because we have to, but I'll get to that when the kingdom splinters. Allegedly, Tolkien also said that from Malvergil on, the names kept a pattern of 3 syllables with one meaningful element, with Ara used. And he compared it to a family's habit of, the way we change names like Robert into Rob, Bob, Hob, Dob, like stuff like that. So we're going to get to some of my favourite etymology bit in a while. But 2 Quenya suffixes recur quite a lot throughout this. Indil, which means friend or devoted to, which comes from a much longer, a better root of the word, which I'll get to when we get to Elendil. But Undil means friend or devoted to, and Endur means servant. So Valandil is a friend of the Valar, and Valandur is a servant of the Valar. Elendil is a servant of the elves, and Earendil is a servant of the sea. So that's how the names work. If you see a name in Lord of the Rings that is Undil, it means friend of, or Endur, servant of. And on the real world... Huh?
Dildo.
Well, wait till we get there. So on the real world side of this, Tolkien explicitly linked the suffix Undil to the Old English name element wine, which means friend. There's an Old English name called Elfwine, which means elf friend. Elendil... So Elfwine means elf friend in the real world, and it survives today as Alvin. So the modern name Alvin means elf friend. Its original root was elf friend.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. And Tolkien took Earendil, the name that's used quite a lot, from the Old English word Earendel, which is a ray of light or the morning star. The morning star also giving us the name for Lucifer as well. But he found the Earendel in Beowulf's poem Christ. And he said that a lot of his mythology grew from that Earendel being a single ray of light. Also, the marks of office, the heirlooms of the house. We've got the scepter of Numenor, which is a silver rod, which is the mark of the northern royalty, which came from Numenor, that one. The shards of Narsil, which were Elendil's broken sword, which is reforged into Anduril, flame of the west. The Star of Elendil, which is worn on the brow. And then later on, we have the Elfstone, the LSR, from which Aragorn takes his royal name. For more details on that, listen to the Aragorn series. And each of these were broadly kept at Rivendell safe for when it was good. One of the big enemies throughout this whole saga for this kingdom is Angmar. The Witch-king of Angmar founded the realm. The Witch-king founded the realm of Angmar. And that is the reason that Arnor is destroyed, as I've mentioned. So he wins, essentially. The Witch King, he wins. And he kind of accomplishes what Sauron couldn't, which is quite nice. I do like that. But their war runs for like 700 years. It's a war of attrition. And it doesn't... Angmar is destroyed at the end, but they achieved what they wanted to. So Angmar comes into this quite a lot. That is like the main on-site. Just like Gondor has Umbar as like their main opponent, Angmar is Arnor's main one.
Okay.
So you ready for the first one, Becca? You ready to start our trip through the trip through the kings?
Go on then.
Number 1, Elendil. He was born second age 3119 in Numenor. He dies second age 3441. He reigns from 3320 of the second age to 3441. So he reigns for about 121 years as the king of both Arnor and Gondor, the High King. Now, his name in Quenya can be read two ways: elf friend or star lover. Strictly, it means devoted to the stars.
It doesn't mean that he's shagging stars.
Will fuck anybody who's been in TMZ. But this is the bit I want to get to, right? I mentioned earlier that Indil is a Quenya suffix added to names to indicate friendship, love, or devotion to an object, idea, grouping, blah, 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 blah. Yeah?
Yeah.
Endil comes from the longer form from the root Endildo. Enildo means friend. So I checked this. I triple checked it to make sure it wasn't just me having a fever dream. It comes from the root word dildo. Dil comes from dildo in Tolkien's own language, in Quenya. I checked it, and I will give you the source here. I got a copy of the PDF copy of Vinya Tengwa 46, and in that, dildo is Gloucester's friend. So being adults again, I just fucking love that. But being adults, the Edain used it to refer to mean elf friend. So, the Edain, the good humans who went to Numenor on that. they use it to mean elf friend. So Elendildo means elf friend, because humans tended to confuse the elements for star and elf, which I thought was pretty interesting. But I prefer to think of Elendil as being an elf dildo.
Yeah.
Like, they called him that because they were just...
They passed him round.
They passed him around like a joint. Elendil was passed around the northern elvish kingdom by Gil-galad and Elrond and Galadriel like a cigarette in a prison yard. Elendil was used as currency amongst elves.
Oh, he left a trail like a snail.
He leaked. Elendil the leaker. So in Tolkien so I mentioned that elf wine thing earlier. That comes from letter 156 to Robert Murray, who taught, this is where we get that from. And his reign in brief, Elendil led the faithful out of Númenor, founded the two realms in exile. He fell at the siege of Barad-dûr in the War of the Last Alliance. He was cast down by Gil-galad while overthrowing Sauron. His sword Narsil broke beneath him, and Tolkien described him as a Noachian figure, like an echo of Noah surviving the flood, because that's essentially his origin story, right? You get a divine message to pack up everything dear to him in ships and get the fuck out of Dodge. And he survives because of it, because he has faith. He's the faithful. Kids, he has two sons, Isildur and Anarion. Number 2, Isildur, reigns about 2 years, from 3441 of the Second Age to the year 2 of the Third Age. He was born in the Second Age 3209 and dies, as I mentioned, in the second year of the Third Age. His name means Quenya devoted to the moon or moon servant. Isil, moon, and Dur, servant. His reign in brief, I'd be very surprised if nobody knows who Isildur is. He cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand with the shards of Narsil and keeps it against all good advice. 2 years later, he's ambushed by orcs at the Gladden Fields, and the ring betrays him, slipping from his finger as he tries to escape across the Anduin. And he had left Gondor in the care of his nephew Menelndil, which is why the two kingdoms parted, because that's where the lines were splitting. And there's I've got a note here about the Gladden Fields that I wanted to talk about. In Arnor's early history, so we're in the first 2 centuries of the kingdom here, the disaster at the Gladden Fields is their most significant event, perhaps until the splintering of the kingdom, or perhaps even until Angmar comes along. It's very significant. So 2 years on from the last alliance, Isildur, who is now High King because his dad's dead, was travelling north from Gondor, and he was ready to take up rule in Arnor. And he had with him his 3 eldest sons and a few hundred men. And this is in Unfinished Tales. There's a much more full account of this. But in the Gladden Fields, the marshy ground is where the Gladden meets the Anduin, and a host of orcs ambush them. And Isildur's sons, Elendil, Aratan, and Cirion, were killed, and the guard was overwhelmed. So Isildur puts on the One Ring to escape. He swims for the river, and the ring slips off, where he gets shot dead in the water. The ring sinks into the Anduin, and it waits 2,500 years for a certain Deagle, the true Hobbit ring bearer, to find it. It's just, the North loses its High King, and that's where the ring really starts to fuck up history in earnest, with especially with the human kingdoms.
Yeah.
So Isildur had 4 sons, the 3 I've just mentioned, and Valandildor, the Valar's dildo, the youngest, kept safe at Rivendell.
Would you rather be an elf dildo or a Valar dildo?
I like very stern, powerful, strong women, so I would go straight to the top because I have ambition, and I would let Varda use me sternly.
Right.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, Valar. I feel like they'll be quite freaky.
Valandil, he reigns about 247 years. He was 11 when his dad died. He was at Rivendell at the time with his mum. And he took up the rule only when he was grown up. And he was born 3430 of the Second Age and died Third Age 249. After this, I'm going to stop telling you when they were born. I'm just going to start doing the reign dates because it starts to get unclear. And I also can't be asked. So his name in Quenya means devoted to the Valar, Valandildo, or devoted dildo. Reign in brief. As the only surviving son of Isildur, he claimed the kingship of the North alone. He didn't try and claim Gondor, which is very interesting because he doesn't make an active attempt to try and reunite the kingdoms, which is the start of the drift. Perhaps, speculation, if he had acted here, they might not have been adrift, but who knows. Then we come to Eldacar, who is Valandil's recorded heir, Eldacar. He reigned for 90 years this is all Third Age now, from 249 to 339. His name is Quenya, meaning elf helm, elder plus karma, Eldacar, elder karma, elf helm. No recorded events. Not to be confused with the much later king Eldacar of Gondor. A lot of name reuse. His son, Arantar, reigned for 96 years. Very short reigns now, if we notice this. It's still that decline all the way from Numenor. They're not living as long. Eldacar was 252 when he died. Valandil was 249. Arantar was 250 when he died. Arantar reigns from 339 to 435, Third Age. And his name isn't properly glossed, so Tolkien didn't explicitly state what it was. But it probably means Royal High One or High King, because it's got that Ara or Aran, which is the kingly moniker. And he's got a peaceful reign during the long years of the North Kingdom's strength. His heir, Tarsil or Tarkil, this one's quite interesting. He reigns for 80 years, dies 235, and his name means Highman or Númenórean, which is a synonym for Dúnedain, right? But what is interesting with his name is anyone who has played the Shadow of War or Shadow of Mordor games, or it's mentioned in the text, orcs call men Tarks sometimes, like they call them Tarks, which they use it as a derogatory way, like an insult, like they call us a Tark. But what they're actually saying is that word is derived from the Tarkil, which was also an early name for Aragorn. But what they're really saying is they are calling someone a Highman or a Númenórean or a Dúnedain, so this could get the Tark. Like they're actually using a really old High Elvish word without realising it. Which it'd be kind of like if you're in a proper...
Cool how it's passed down.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, guys, I've made a very similar joke in the Gondor episode, but I'm going to make it here. It's almost like if you're in a proper serious street fight with someone, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to have you, mate, yeah. I'm fucking sick of your chicanery and tomfoolery. I'll have you, you buffoon. Like, they're just like, they switch up, like, you'd be like, whoa, what? What words are you using there? Excuse me? Like, they're just completely out of left field. So Aragorn hearing the word Tark must be like, wow, these orcs must really read. They are very interested in history. But unfortunately, that's not enough to save them. He'll still kill them. Anyway, Tark, not much happens. He's got a recorded heir, Tarondor, reigns for 87 years, 515 to 602. His name means King of Stones or Royal Rock, allegedly. It's not glossed by Tolkien, it's just recreations and breakdowns of the language. Ondor means stone. We know that a lot. That's where Gondor comes from. Valandor dies before his time. He reigns for 50 years and dies when he's 190. But it never says why he died. And his name just means servant of the Valar or friend of the Valar. But he dies early. Nobody says why. I'm going to say sex accident. Autoerotic asphyxiation.
I'm going to say drowning.
From his wife sitting on his face?
No, they just seem to really love water and losing things.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So,
their life.
yeah, exactly.
King number 9, Elendil, reigns for 125 years, dies aged 225, rules from 652 to 777. His name means servant of the elves. And this is where we start to have a big hubbub here. Elendil, the last king of a unified Arnor, reigns for 84 years, dies aged 221. His name means servant of the sea or professional mariner. His name obviously has a lot in common with the Elendil, and, we've already covered that. But he's the 10th and last king of the undivided Arnor. On his death, his sons start arguing and fighting, and Arnor splinters into 3 kingdoms: Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur.
Is there 3 sons?
There is 3 sons, and there is at least 3 sons, sorry. Amlaeth is the only one whose name is recorded, and the other 2 ones became the first kings of Cardolan and Rhudaur. So here is a good time to talk about those 2 realms that failed, because it's actually not as involved as I thought it was. So Arthedain is in the northwest of Arnor, Cardolan is the south, and Rhudaur is the northeast. The senior claim, i.e. the oldest son and the unbroken line of Isildur, runs on through Arthedain, and that is where Aragorn is descended from. Tolkien never named a king of Cardolan or a king of Rhudaur. In both realms, the appendices just say the line of Isildur faded quickly, and the Chronicles of the North don't keep a king list for either of them. So we can't have a numbered succession like we've just been talking about. But we do know a couple of things, is that the last prince of Cardolan is of note in that he tangentially is involved in the story of Lord of the Rings, and an evil man at some point takes up the kingship of Rhudaur, and this is someone who is in league with the Witch-king. But Cardolan kind of comes back on side for it. But if you ever come across any named people who said, oh, this was the king of Cardolan, this was the king of Rhudaur, it's probably from something like Lord of the Rings Online, where they've just kind of like invented some new names for it. But Cardolan is Sindarin, and it means Red Hill Land, or Land of the Red Hills, from Caran Red, Dol Hill, and the ending An is land. So Tolkien never glossed that himself, but it's just recreations that it's kind of best guesses from people who know the languages. The red might be actually quite literal, because apparently there is red rocks in the region, like there's red stone near the ford over the Loudwater. And there's also someone called Roger Cluley chose a slightly different interpretation of the name and called it the Land of Hidden Houses. So he took the name Car, which means house, and Dolin, which means hidden or secret, which, considering that's where like the Barrow Downs are, Cardolan might be the house, the Land of Hidden Houses. That might be a pretty cool name for it. Rhudaur, Tolkien did state what the name was. He called it Trollshaw, with the element Rhu, meaning evil or wicked, and Tower, forest, so evil forest. And shaw is an archaic English word for a small wood. So we have lots of shaws near us, for example, like lots of thickets. This also lives on in English surnames like Shaw, Bagshaw, Openshaw, And did you know Tolkien was a philologist?
I would never have known.
Well, he was. So he used all of these words quite deliberately. So the troll shaws live on, and Rhudaur is a very good approximation of it. And there's also someone else, Hammond and Skull. They suggested that Rhu, as in east, like Rune, which is obviously the east of the world, it could mean that Rhudaur instead means east forest. So it could be east forest, it could be evil wood, it could be troll shaw. I mean, Tolkien did render it himself as troll shaw, but like the other interpretations there as well, which is, it's nice. So Cardolan, it's the southern realm, and this one stayed loyal to Arthedain, even though they said, like, we want to be our own country, I want to rule my own thing, but we're still going to be friends. It bore the brunt of Angmar's first great assault on the kingdom and never really recovered. Cardolan and Rhudaur both wanted the Weather Hills, and in particular they wanted Amon Sul on Weathertop because it held the Palantir, and that's what they wanted access to. But obviously all 3 ended up in the keeping of Arthedain. The line of Isildur failed early in Cardolan, as with Rhudaur, and Argaleb I of Arthedain claimed lordship over all the Old Realm around 1349 of the Third Age. This was after, so it's split in 861 of the Third Age, And then a few centuries later, Argaleb said, nah, we're coming back together, fam. And Cardolan, having no heirs of Isildur left, apparently accepted this claim, allegedly. And from them, from then on, that's why they called the Princes of Cardolan, because they accepted the claim of Argaleb from Arthedain. They said, yeah, we're ready to come back into the fold. Okay, in return, you'll be a Prince of Cardolan. In the same way that Elendil called the Princes of Dol Amroth a prince because they were noble people who already lived in Gondor. And he said, well, this is the kingdom, but you can be your own little thing over there in Dol Amroth and we'll call you a prince. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Arthedain and Cardolan, pretty friendly, right? You come back into the fold a few centuries later. You're not a king, but you are a prince. You're still quite high up. Good on you. After Argaleb dies in 1356, Cardolan and Lindon, the elves, help his son Arveleg I drive the enemy back from the Weather Hills. And for half a century, Arthedain and Cardolan hold a common battle line. They hold a common frontier. Then in the Third Age, 1409, a great host comes out of Angmar, overruns Cardolan, surrounds Weathertop, and burns down the Tower of Amon-Sul. That is the year the last Prince of Cardolan is slain. And that'll be what... Was it Merry or Pippin who sees it from the barrow when they wake up? But that's what one of the hobbits sees when they're waking up. And in Third Age, 1636, the Great Plague comes out of the east, and it kills most of the people in Cardolan. Worst of all in Mini-Arath, which is, one of the settlements there. And that is the end of Cardolan as a people. That decimates them. Their population can't really recover. That's when the Barrow-wights move in, as we've discussed with the Barrow-down. And then when King Araval of Arthedain tries to resettle the land in 1851, like we mentioned a while ago, that's when the whites drive off anyone who comes too close. So I'm giving you it again with some more context now. Like, they were the ones who were the less, like the kingdom splintered, but Arthedain and Cardolan eventually kind of made it up together, which is, nice. Then we've got Rhudaur. These were different. These were bastards. I imagine it was probably the youngest son, if Rhudaur, just given the way it works, they were probably the biggest dickheads. Rhudaur was like the bleak hill country where like the troll shores and stuff were. And even though the exiles of Numenor had settled the hills in the Second Age around like what would become Rhudaur, there was never many Dunedain in the area, so it wasn't like a mega populated area. So you were kind of just rocking up to one of the most barren parts of the kingdom and being like, I own this now. And like I mentioned, there was some Stewart hobbits around the angle, but not a massive population. But by the days of Argaleb I, power in Rhudaur had been seized by an evil lord of the Hillmen. So it wasn't even the heirs of Isildur anymore. That had completely gone. It was now the kingdom had been seized by Hillmen, probably descendants or relation to the Dunlendings, who had historic beef with Rohan. They were in league with Angmar, secret league with Angmar, and only a few proper full-blooded, quote-unquote, full-blooded Dunedain were left in the kingdom anyway. But you now had one kingdom working against the other two in league with the much bigger threat that was behind them, which was Angmar. Argaleb claimed lordship, as we just mentioned, but Rhudaur resisted. And Rhudaur was the first of the three realms to fall, and it never rose again. Thank God, the sneaky little fox. But as from Rhudaur, again, the Witch King sent forward like evil spirits and what have you. And at the Battle of Fornost in 1975, the evil men of Rhudaur were destroyed fully. Finally. But a shadow still lay on the land for like so long after, for forever after. So do we know enough about Rhudaur and Cardolan? Should we move on?
Yeah.
Back to the other kings. So now we've got the kings of Arthedain, and we're going to go through these because there is 15 of them.
Lord.
Oh, Lord, indeed. This is an undertaking in itself. This is a mega episode, isn't it? It is a mega episode. And it's very dense. This one's for the nerds. So now we're into Arthedain. Amlaeth of Fornost, the first king of Arthedain, He ruled for 85 years, and one speculative reading of his name means from a guy called Mark Fisher that it's got something to do with the element up and light. I don't know what that would mean, like upwards light, something like that. I have no idea. It's a very difficult name to try and gloss. But he was the eldest son and rightful heir of Earendil, and the kingdom split, but he's the one who moves the royal seat from Numenor to Fornost, allegedly, and he was the first of his line to take a Sindarin name rather than a Quenya name, which is a change that everybody obeys after him. Then you've got Beleg, who is his son and heir. Beleg, if you're familiar with anything in the Silmarillion, or the tale of the children of Húrin, that is Túrin's boyfriend. Historians will say they're just friends. Beleg Strongbow, but Beleg means strong, so an elf called Beleg Strongbow is Strongbow, which is very interesting. But his name Sindari means great, large, mighty. It might be a reference to his stature, or a reference to Beleg Cuthalion or Beleg Strongbow, the famous archer of the First Age. And he ruled for 83 years between 946 and 1029 of the Third Age. But it's during his reign, during Beleg's reign, that hobbits first enter Eriador and Sauron takes up residence in Dol Guldur. His son Malor rules for 81 years. And in his name in Sindarin, because it contains Mal, it's probably got something to do with gold. But we don't really know what. But in his reign, around 1050 of the Third Age, this is where the hobbits are first starting to make their home properly. So we've got hobbits settling around these two kings. And his son, Kelefan, he ruled for 81 years. And again, we don't really know much about what his name might mean, but it contains the element for silver, which is quite... So you got Mal for gold, Kel for silver. But during his reign, more hobbits follow. So you've had the half-foot hobbits arrive first. Then after that, you get the Falahides and the Stewards, crossing the Misty Mountains into Eriador. His son, Celebrimbor, rules for 81 years. His name probably means Silver Lord. And it's a largely peaceful reign. We get to Malvagil. And he rules for 77 years, from 1272 of the Third Age to 1349. This is where it starts to kick off, because Angmar is rising now. And his name possibly means Sword of Gold. Mal, gold, Megil, sword. But around the year 1300, seeing the disunion of the northern Dunedain, the Witch King comes north and founds the realm of Angmar. Evil men, orcs, trolls, they all start gathering to his banner. And this is the end of the peace in the north. Like, it's going bad. And it's around this time that the hobbits realize what's going on, and they start moving west to Bree because they're unsettled by Angmar coming north. His son, Argaleb I, reigns for 7 years and is slain in battle. His name probably means Silver King or Lord of Silver, something like that. And because there was no heirs of Isildur left in Cardolan or Rhudaur by this point, he claims the title King of Arnor, because the lines of Isildur have failed. And he was slain in battle with Angmar and Rhudaur. Arvaleg I, his son, rules for 53 years. His name possibly means Mighty King. And with Cardolan and Lindon, he drove Angmar back from the Weather Hills and holds it for about 50 years. And he was slain in a bloody battle at Amon Sul. And when the tower fell, they managed to save the Palantir. And his heir, Arafor, his son, he becomes king on the battlefield. And he was only 18 years old when he ascends. And he reigns for 180 years. His name possibly means Royal Fist or King of the Fist, which is a name I would love to hold. King of the Fist.
I wonder why.
Oh, God, I love it. His heir, it's just fighting. He repels the enemy from Fornost and the North Downs, and there's just fighting. Argaleb II rules for 81 years between 1589 and 1670. Possibly means Silver King or Lord of Silver, like we talked about with the first one. And this is the guy, Argalib II. He grants the hobbits the right to settle the land beyond the Baranduin, the Shire. He lets them found the Shire. So in the Third Age, 1601, the Fallowhide brothers Marcho and Blanco lead many hobbits across the river and found the Shire, which dated its reckoning from that year. And later on in his reign, this is when the Great Plague happens. But if you ever see a Shire reckoning, you add 1600 years to that date to get the Middle-earth date. His son, Arvagil, rules for 73 years to Third Age 1743. And his name maybe means royal sword. Who knows? But the Great Plague has devastated most of the north by this point, so he is inherited. Cardolan's empty. Rudauer's fucking evil. Angmar's about. This is not a good time to be around. Like it's really not good. Things are in decline. Is probably the best way to put it.
The reigns aren't very long.
No, they are. It's turbulent, yeah. Arvaleg II only rules for 70 years to 1813 of the Third Age, and possibly means Mighty King, like we mentioned with Arvaleg I. Nothing really happens in his reign, just situation normal, all fucked up. Angmar's still a menace. So, do you know, we talk about the realm in decline? We are just kind of going through them on the down and down. And then we get to Araval, who reigns for 78 years until 1891 of the Third Age. His name possibly means Golden King. And he wins an important victory over Angmar and pushes them back northwards out of their lands, forcing Angmar to build up his strength again. And he does that with the Elves of Lindon and Rivendell helping him. And then with the next king, we see a reconciliation with Gondor, which is with the king Araphant, who rules until 1964 of the Third Age. And it's weird, like, his name might mean full king, but who knows? But at this point, Arthedain had been at war with Angmar for about 500, 600 years. Like, it was fucking getting on. But it's during this reign that he gets in touch with King Onderhair of Gondor, and they realize that they've got a common enemy. Like, they've both been fighting against Angmar, and they've both been fighting against, like, who directed by Sauron. They realize that both realms are under attack by essentially the same person. So in a token of reuniting, his son, Araphant's son, marries Onderhair's daughter. So Arvedwi marries Firiel in 1940 of the Third Age. However, this doesn't have any immediate benefits because neither kingdom can spare help for the other because Gondor are under attack at the same time. However, this is where Aragorn gets his claim to both kingdoms from, is from this line, being descended from these two people. So at the time, Gondor was under attack by the Wain Riders, like the Wagon Riders, and obviously Arnor under attack, Arthedain are under attack from Angmar. Onderhair died 4 years later, and Gondor was left kingless, and obviously they didn't want a queen. So Arvedwi claims the kingship of Gondor on behalf of his wife, but the steward at the time in Gondor, Pelendor, persuaded the Council of Gondor to instead select a distant relative of Onderhair called Eärnil. However, the heirs of Arvedwi did not forget who they were, and they claimed to be the heirs of both Isildur and Anarion. So this is where Gondor, for me, really starts to fall off. They reject like what could be a legitimate blood claim to the throne. They're all descended from Elendil, and Gondor say, no, we're going to select someone else. And Araphant rules Arthedain for 73 years and was succeeded by Arvedwi, who was the last king of Arthedain until Aragorn. So Arvedwi rules for 10 years, and the North Kingdom falls in 1974 when Angmar takes Fornost. His name is the Last King, and this guy was born with a prophecy attached to him. Arvedwi was named at birth by Malbeth the seer, whose prophecy is recorded in the appendices. Arvedwi you shall call him, for he will be the last in Arthedain. And on Onderhair's death, he claims the crown of Gondor through his wife, like we just mentioned, and he's refused. And in 1974, Angmar takes Fornost, and the kingdom of Arthedain ends. Arvedui flees north and is sheltered in the Ice Bay Forakel by the Lossoth. And he was lost when a ship sent by Círdan the shipwright to rescue him was wrecked in a storm in the bay, and with it sank the two Palantiri. The Lossoth tell him not to get on that boat. Wait, just wait. There is a storm coming. Don't do it. And
he's like, here's a gift.
Well,
See you later.
yes, exactly. He gives them the Ring of Barahir as a like a way for them to help him, and they do, and then he still ignores their advice. So, fool. So we'll take a little detour here because after this we're going to get into the last tranche, which is the chieftains of the Dunedain. So by the time we reach Arvedui in the story, right, the enemy that finishes off the North Kingdom has been at work for centuries. That's where we're at. So we'll step back, right? What is Angmar? Because it's not just a passing thing. It's not just a border feud. It's a constant pressure on Arnor. The Witch-king of Angmar is a constant pressure. He is there, always attacking, always. You slip for a second and you're fucked. Is that? And eventually they do. And the Witch-king of Angmar had one goal, which was, and the whole kingdom was raised with that one goal, which is destroy the heirs of Isildur and erase the kingdom from the map. And across roughly 675 years, it picks apart the three northern kingdoms one by one. Angmar is read as Iron Home from Ang, iron, and the element Mbar, habitation, home. In pure Sindarin, it would be Angbar, and in pure Quenya, it would be Angamar. And it's said to be corrupted. It's said to be corrupted because of how the pure versions would render, which is interesting. So, we've obviously got Ang, which we hear a lot. We've got Angainor, which is the unbreakable chain that bounds Morgoth. We've got Angband, which is Morgoth's iron prison in the north of Beleriand. And we've got Angband, which is where people write dirty stories about Morgoth and Sauron. And, Angmar as well, it's obviously a little nod to Angband itself. Like, it's a little echo of, Morgoth and his old fortress. The capital of Angmar is Carn Dûm, and Tolkien didn't say what it meant, but it likely means red halls or red fortress, with Carn being Sindarin for red. And Dûm isn't Elvish, but it does actually match Dwarvish better. So Khazad Dûm means halls or mansions, so it might be red mansions, red halls, red fortress. So it might be something completely different, or it might be a little hybrid for a mountain citadel place. And then there's also, because did you know Tolkien was a philologist?
Really?
Yeah, I need you.
Never knew.
Yeah, so I need you to know that. In Gaelic, Carn Dûm can be read also as mountain fortress, so that's probably the most likely one. And in early manuscripts of Lord of the Rings, Carn Dûm, spelled Carndoom, appear as early names of Dimril Dale, which is where the last battle between orcs and dwarves are fought outside of Moria. That's what that's called outside. There's the Dimril Dale. So Angmar, where is it? What is it? It's a country that sits at the very top of the world in the far north. So if you look on the map, it's where the Misty Mountains start to end. It's like the very top of the Misty Mountains where they kind of peter away into like hills and stuff. And it's the northeast of Eridor, northwest of the Vales of Anduin. And it straddles the top of the mountains, like with land on both sides. Its southern edge was the Etten Moors, which is the Trollfells we've discussed. Its spine was the mountains of Angmar, which is the northwestern tail of the Misty Mountains, which goes out to the side past Mount Gundabad, which is, where a lot of orcs were. To the north is the empty cold of the Forodwaith, which is the northern waste, which is a horrible, shitty, snowy country. But that was chosen purposefully because the Witch King's power is strongest in the deeps of winter, and this is what the Lossoth warned Aravudui at Forakel. So they say don't go until summer. There's going to be big storms, like that the Witch King is powerful in the cold. Wait until it's warmer. We don't know anything really about Angmar, unfortunately. We just know Tolkien said it was the far north and that evil men, orcs, and other fell creatures are there. That's kind of it. Everything else is like Black Numenorians called the Angmarim from the Lord of the Rings online. It's not from Tolkien. So it's unfortunate because it's one of those where it's an amazing thing you would love to see fleshed out, but it's probably not going to be. So around the year 1300, Sauron's shadow begins to appear in the south and the Nazgul reappear in the world, and Angmar, the Witch-king of Angmar, comes forth. He founds Angmar, seeing that the kingdom's divided, and sees a chance and goes for it, and he dedicates himself to the cause. So for centuries, nobody knew this was Sauron anymore. Like, this was a long time past, like that, him really doing anything of note. So he'd been behind the scenes for a long time. So for centuries, like the free people of Middle-earth, they knew there was a powerful sorcerer king in the north, and just like Sauron, the Witch King of Angmar also hid behind the scenes. They didn't know he was one of the Nazgul. They didn't know that's who that was. They just thought he was like just this evil kind of sorcerer, in the same way that they thought Sauron was like that when he was in Dol Guldur in Mirkwood. And it wasn't until far too late they realised who it was, just like with Sauron. He rises during the reign of Malvagil of Arthedain, who's the sixth king, and that's when things start. And his whole strategy was based on the fact that, okay, I can win because they've splintered into three kingdoms. If this was just Arnor against Angmar, it would have likely ended quite badly for Angmar. But it was splintered into three. Then he gets Rudauer on side, which eventually it means it's 2-on-2, which is not good. So Rudauer falls by the mid-1300s, and because the Dunedain were always few in that land, all we get is an evil lord of the Hillmen, seizes power, becomes in league with Angmar in secret, which I imagine confuses things a lot. And then in the 1409, a great host comes from Angmar and breaks the frontier at Weathertop, which is where the tower is burned, and Arvaleg the First is killed in the field. And we keep going from 1409 to 1973. This was just a big, massive war of attrition with a huge plague in the middle. Like, this was not a good time. It really wasn't. And in 1974, Angmar gathers his final forces, overruns Arthedain, takes Fornost, which is the capital, as we've mentioned, and Arvedui flees north. Gondor sends a relief fleet under Arnor, but they arrive too late to save the realm. But in 1975, the combined host of Gondor, Lindon, and the surviving Dunedain destroy Angmar's army at the Battle of Fornost. And the Witch King was routed, so he was beaten in battle, and not a man nor an orc of that realm was left west of the Misty Mountains, so they destroyed everyone. 2 years later, Frumgar, who is of the Eotheod, the ancestors of the Rohirrim, they drive off the last of Angmar's people on the eastern side of the range. So the entire realm is destroyed except for the Witch King of Angmar. And while Earnor tries to pursue him and finish off this fight, like in that Battle of Fornost, Glorfindel, the mega bad, awesome, cool elf from the First Age who killed a Balrog, he stops Earnor with a prophecy that wouldn't be answered for over 2,000 years. Not by the hand of man will he fall, which sets the scene for, in 3019 of the Third Age in the Battle of Pelennor for Eowyn, and technically Merry, because he's not a man, he's a hobbit, they both kill him, which is pretty cool. So Angmar was an incredibly effective enemy that outlives its own defeat. And we'll go into this in the Gondor episode, but Earnor is then tricked shortly after. I think it's the year 1980, possibly, where the Witch King, he takes Minas Ithil, turns it into Minas Morgul, the other side, one of the cities in Gondor. And he sends him a message saying, come and fight me one-on-one, pussy. And Arnor goes. He disappears. And that's the last King of Gondor. That is how stupid the line of Gondor ends until Aragorn rebuilds it, is that the Witch King says, come and fight me one-on-one. And he just gets jumped. Like, he just gets kidnapped. He gets taken into Minas Morgul's, never seen again. Okay, that always catches me out how stupid it is. It's just, what the fuck? Good lord. So, a timeline of the Angmar War. 1300, Angmar founds it. 1349, Argaleb I claims all of Arnor. 1356, Argaleb is slain. 1409, a big host from Angmar comes south. Amon Sul is burnt. That's where Weathertop becomes shitty. 1636, the Great Plague fucks everyone up. 1851, Araval attempts to resettle Cardolan. Ghosts scare him off. 1940, Angmar coordinates with the Wain Riders against Gondor. Arvedui Red's Firiel as the Old Alliance is renewed. 1973, Arthedain sends word to Gondor. Eärnil sends Arnor north, but they don't get there in time. 1974, Angmar overruns Arthedain. Fornost falls. The North Kingdom is fucked. 1975, in March, Arvedui drowns at Forokel. 1975, the host of the West destroys Angmar at the Battle of Fornost. A prophecy is made. Everybody's killed. 1977, everybody else who was left, who was part of Angmar, is killed by Frumgar and the Eotheod, who they do their thing. 1980, the Witch King reaches Mordor and gathers the Nazgul, and he doesn't leave again until 3018, until he comes forth to hunt the One Ring. We've got 16 chieftains of Dunedain left, which comes from... So when Arthedain falls, Arvedui's son, Aranarth, didn't take the crown. I think he has some wisdom and he thinks, I don't think kings are working anymore. So he takes the title of chieftain and he leads the dwindled Dunedain, who becomes the Rangers of the North. The chieftains were fostered at Rivendell and their heirs are as well, just keeping in tradition. You go into Uncle Elrond's house. And through Firiel of Gondor, they hold a claim to the Southern Throne as well. Most of them live out a full kind of lifespan, and there's 16 generations to Aragorn. It's the same people, it's the same royal line. Like, you're just not calling themselves kings anymore. It's the same bloodline. It's just they spend their time, they're reduced, their population dwindles to like possibly a few hundred. It's not many. Like, to the point where a singular Dunedain being spotted is an event in like Bree and stuff like that. Like, they know Strider by the name of Strider. Like, he's not just, there's one of the Rangers. It's just, there's the Ranger, Strider. Like, so their population is massively reduced. It's just crazy. But they do important work. They focus on the people. That's what they do. They protect the North the best way they know how. Not through, like, they don't do it through, like, pitched battles. They don't do it through bureaucracy, through government, through all of that. They're out there, and that's where I have the most respect. Like, of all these so far, I have the most respect for these ones, is that, like, they're out there protecting proper people. They're making the land as safe as they can. And prepare yourselves for all these words beginning with Ara. We've got the first chieftain, Aranarth, who rules until 2106 of the Third Age, and he rules for 130 years, and his title means noble king. And he's the one who kind of sets up everything for everyone else coming forward. He chooses the humble title of chieftain over the scattered remnant of his people who now live in mostly like the Angle and stuff like that. He gives the heirlooms of Arnor to Elrond to keep at Rivendell. And that's pretty much it. Like, Arahel is his son. He rules for 71 years. And his name means wise king. And he leads the Dunedain through the Watchful Peace, which is where they're just kind of set now, just waiting for something to happen, just keeping things ticking over. Aranuia rules for 70 years until 2247. His name means Eternal King. Aravir, his son, rules for 72 years. His name means Royal Jewel or Noble Jewel. He has a couple of skirmishes with orcs, but nothing really. Aragorn I rules for 8 years until he's slain by wolves. His name means Revered King. Go and watch the Aragorn episode if you're interested in his etymology. He was killed by wolves in Eastern Eriador. His son, Araglas, rules for 128 years, which is the second longest apart from Aranarth. Nothing happens. Arahad the First rules for 68 years until 2523. Possibly means royal place, something like that. Sauron returns to Dol Guldur during his reign. Orcs multiply in the Misty Mountains. And it is around this time, actually, that Elrond's wife, Celebrian, is waylaid by orcs in the Misty Mountains and suffers something so traumatic that she then leaves Middle-earth forever. Yeah. And the Eotheod are now coming down from the north, and they are very soon going to become the Rohirrim. So this is in 2523. So we're 500 years out now from the War of the Ring. Aragost rules until 2588, rules for about 65 years. His name means something like Royal Dread, which is pretty cool. And there's something about Tolkien where dread doesn't mean necessarily terror. It can mean terror, but it can also mean like majesty, like the awe you feel. Nothing happened. The enemy's attention was fixed on Gondor, so nothing's really going on in the north. Aravorn, which is just some Luigi and Waluigi bullshit. Aravorn rules for 66 years until 2654, which means Black King, or possibly Steadfast. Nothing happens. Arahad II, 65 years, rules until 2719. Nothing happens. Arasuil, orcs invade Eriador. Something happens. He rules for 65 years until 2784. His name means just royal, and then nobody knows what the other part means, which is cool. I like this, where there's still things left unexplained. It gives us that chance that there's still a letter somewhere that explains some of this. The orcs of the Misty Mountains grow a bit bold here, and this is where the game of golf is invented in Middle-earth. The Rangers fight off the orcs who come out of the Misty Mountains with Elladan and Elrohir, Elrond's sons.
And do they use their heads as...
Well, one band of orcs reaches the Shire, where Bandabras or Bullroarer Tuck beat them at the Battle of Greenfield in the 2747 of the Third Age, and that's where golf. So Bandabras Tuck is the one who's big enough to ride a horse, and he knocks off a goblin's head, and it goes down the hole in a tree, and that's how golf is invented. The long winter comes during his reign in 2758, which is a very tough time, which I think is what's happening elsewhere. It is Helm Hammerhand. Rohan's under siege by the Dunlendings. You remember they invade Rohan, they fuck it up, they're trapped in Helm's Deep over the winter. Arathorn the First rules until 2848 for about 64 years. His name means Steadfast King, and the circumstances of his death are obscure, but it is marked as untimely. Another sex accident is what I'm putting there. Perhaps he tried to be an elf dildo and failed. Argonui, who means royal valor, or perhaps royal prince or chief or something. And this is where Bilbo Baggins is born during his reign in 2890, as was Gilraen, Aragorn's mother, who was born in 2907. And late in his rule, the fell winter freezes the Brandywine and brings white wolves into Eriador. And this is the Great Floods that ruin Tharbad, like I mentioned earlier. And his son, Arador, was slain by trolls, who he reigned for 18 years, and his name means noble lord or royal lord, and this is Arathorn's granddad. Aragorn's dad, Arathorn II, rules for 3 years and until 2933, which means steadfast king. He marries Gilraen, Aragorn's mum, in 2929, and Aragorn is born in 2931. When Aragorn is 2 years old, Arathorn was slain by an orc arrow through the eye while hunting orcs with Elladan and Elrohir. Gilraen takes Aragorn to Rivendell to be fostered by Elrond. And last, but most certainly not least, we have Aragorn II, Aragorn Telcontar, LSR, the king. Aragorn reigns as chieftain from 2933 to 3019 of the Third Age, who he then becomes the High King of the Reunited Kingdom from the Third Age 3019 which is the first year of the Fourth Age, to Fourth Age 120. Aragorn was born in 2931 and died aged 210 in 120 of the Fourth Age. His name means revered king. His Quenya form is Aracorno, which is nearly as good as Teleporno. Also got many other names: Estelle, Strider, Thorongil, Envignata, Telcontar, Elisar, all the ones that I didn't mention, but go and listen to the Aragorn series, fuck's sake. This is an overview. Aragorn is the 16th and last chieftain and the heir of the long-broken line who comes home. After the War of the Ring, he's crowned and he reunites Gondor and Arnor after 3,000 years. Nearly. And he marries Arwen Undomiel and becomes an elf dildo. At his crowning, he speaks again the words that the first king, all the way back at the beginning of this episode, thousands of years ago, Etarelo endorena utulien, sinome maruvan a hildinya ten ambarmeta. Out of the great sea to Middle-earth I am come. In this place I will abide, and my heirs, until the ending of the world. And Bilbo's verse, made for Aragorn and read at the Council of Elrond, closes the loop in this whole thing, in which he says, the crownless again shall be king. And Aragorn has one son, Eldarion, who rules from Fourth Age 120 to who knows when, and he has several daughters. And does he have several daughters? I wrote that down. I can't remember where I saw that. Probably. Anyway, after Eldarion, the Red Book records no more heirs of Elendil, and that is it. That is the history of Arnor. That is a mega episode. Oh my god, there was so much. I wasn't expecting. There was so much time where just nothing happened. That was the hardest. But I was like, I'm committed to a mega episode. I need to get through it. Like, I need to tell everyone, otherwise someone will be like, oh, you missed it. Oh, I didn't. I don't know if mega episodes are a good idea. This was exhausting.
Yeah, I think timing-wise as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
When there's a new child.
True.
Yeah.
And it's 27 degrees today as well. I'm sweating my tits off.
Yeah.
I'm sweaty. Good Lord. How do you feel? You look tired. You had your eyes closed for several parts of this.
Yeah, it was hard to keep my eyes open.
Yeah, same. Right. Well, I don't know how long this episode's going to be. I need to edit it all together now. I've started. Yeah. So anyway, we're just going to leave it there because I am already full flow into the Gondor episode. So I'm going to release them about a month apart, give you time to digest it. So I'll schedule it to come out together. But after that, come and talk to me. Tell me what episode you want to see in future. Would you want to see more mega episodes? I think I'm going to do a mix now. I think I will. I'm sick of because what I don't like is the 9-part series.
Yeah.
That really fucked me up. So if I've got to do mega episodes where I can record it by myself, fine. I know I can record it in sections now. That's fine. And I think I'll just do other episodes where I'll have like an hour, 2 hours of normal stuff. But what I'm finding is the mega episodes are much more dense as well, which is, yeah. But come and talk to me. Tell me what things you want to know more about, subjects you've always been curious about. We'll go from there. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go and have some lunch now.
I'm going to have a nap.
You're going to have a nap, yeah. Right. Well, in that case then, I'm going to say goodbye from me, Chris.
Goodbye from Rebecca.
Bye.